His father passed away a few days ago, and his family conditions had not been good since the beginning. He lost his mother during his young age, and the relatives were also not any help in his times of need. He was lonely and had no one to truly call a friend. But the most astonishing part for him was that he was thrust into a world of which he was not even aware of. A few minutes ago, Kirito, age 27, was still in Japan, wandering around the city after performing the morning rituals for his father. He found it pretty tough, and when it was all done, he tried to give a thought about how his father had managed everything on his own during his mother's funeral. While he was walking onto the bridge, he was completely blank of thoughts, and all that was going into his head was his loneliness. Kirito lived alone in the city, unmarried. The past few days were some of the busiest of his whole life, and still he was getting a flashback of his father welcoming him back home after his office. This time, there was going to be no one speaking those words. As he was looking very tense, he was thinking of taking a leave today, but due to the workload, all he could manage was just a half day for the next date. While he was still at it, a notification popped up with a work email, and it was pretty clear that the people were not concerned at all about his personal loss. Since work was not stopping, all of this was going through his nerves, and he was getting pissed every hair. His current thoughts were to just vanish from the location to a faraway place, which could act as an escape for him in order to survive a comfortable life. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by someone as he heard a proclamation choosing him for something. Before he could comprehend the voice that echoed in his ears, a bright light emerged out of nowhere, causing him to lose his sight. The next moment, when his eyes opened, he was at a totally unfamiliar location, with differences in every appearance, including the buildings, people, clothing, and all others. The mysterious voice again welcomed him to another world, which left him totally shocked. The voice continued to tell him about the power he was given, which would help him survive his life comfortably. The information was too much, and before he could ask for any other details, the voice vanished. He was left alone in the middle of the city, panicked, gathering the attention of everyone. Left with no other choice, he just sighed and clarified that, even though he wanted to go somewhere, it never meant to be another world. But his thoughts turned when he remembered that if he went back, he would have to survive his corporate slave life once again. Washing off the thought, he immediately decided to take action, as he never wanted the fear of being in another world to paralyze him. Since he had no way to find out how he could go back to his own place for then, he decided to ensure that he lived a good life wherever he was. There was a switch of emotion in his head as, the very next second, his thoughts wobbled because everything surrounding him looked like a game resembling some kind of fantasy, which he used to read about in books and novels. However, being a corporate slave, the first thing that came to mind was money. While he was still finding a way to earn his livelihood while wandering around the city, he found that everyone was giving him a stare. The only reason behind that could be his clothes, which were totally different from anyone there. The style and color did not fit, so he decided to look for a clothes shop. As soon as he found a symbol, he went there, where the shopkeeper was already waiting for a customer and welcomed him while calling him a noble. For the first few seconds, Kirito was just confused about his proclamation and then told of his desire to sell his clothes and get an explanation. He realized that since the quality of material was far better than anyone wandering the streets, that might be the reason behind the guy not recognizing him well. As Kirito went on with the negotiation, the shopkeeper offered him 40 gold coins for the clothes. Since Kirito had no information about the value of currency in that world, he went into a thought, raising concerns for the shopkeeper, who took the price up to 50 gold coins. Instantly, Kirito realized that the shopkeeper was trying to underpay him for his materials. However, that was the best he could do in return for those clothes. Kirito, in a sale, somehow evidently told that the guy was thorough in his words, so he agreed to the deal and asked to choose some regular clothes he could wear in the town. As the purchase was finally completed, Kirito was equipped with the minimum gear and was already aware of the language and writings of that location. The possible explanation could be that the mysterious voice adapted him with everything before sending him to that world. Once again, while he was in the middle of his thoughts, contemplating what he should do first, a small kid somehow bumped into him and then called out to sell her flowers. Kirito somehow found a perfect opportunity and, bending down towards the girl, agreed to buy some flowers in exchange for some information, which were his most critical questions. The little girl quoted each flower to be worth 2 bronze coins, and as Kirito paid the price, he realized that the little girl found the best opportunity and ripped him off with a great price in exchange for the information he was looking for. Starting with the first question, he inquired about the value of money, contemplating that this was not a good question at all. However, if he needed to survive, he needed to act out of record. The little girl raised a wooden stick and went on to give him an explanation, drawing that the currency operates in bronze, silver, and gold. As per the calculation, Courier had around 500,000 yen. He had quite a sufficient amount of money to live his life, so he went on to ask other questions like the country name and if those guys were aware of the country named Japan. The place they were currently in was the capital of the Zil Kingdom, and Courier understood that they really were in another world. The little girl, through his questions, was able to understand that the boy was really unemployed to ask such ridiculous questions. When he clarified his position of being a traveler who just visited the city, the lady suggested he go to the Adventure Guild to get a job. Courier was aware that a guild was a location where people get paid for fulfilling requests. However, for the kid, it was someone who used to take down monsters for a livelihood, which was told by her father. Even though it was pretty dangerous, aware that he could not stay unemployed for long, he decided to pay a visit to the guild, not with the thought of finding employment, but just to check it out. The moment he entered the place, he found some really ugly-looking, scary adventurers waiting inside. While he was having all kinds of rough thoughts in his head, someone welcomed him to the location, questioning his intentions to visit an adventure guild. He was quite surprised with a demi-human taking care of the receptionist at the location. While he was staring too much, he decided to give it a break and then told that he wanted to be an adventurer and was there for a registration. Before going through anything, the lady decided to give him an explanation about the adventurers and then went on to tell about the ranks, which start from S to A. It is decided based on their achievements and the number of tasks they complete. The higher the rank, the sweeter the rewards get, and the challenges become ever more demanding. However, once someone reaches the pinnacle of S rank, they often get requests from the royal capital with the family directly indulging in it and act as an inspiration for others. Someone starting as a new adventurer will start from an F rank and will fulfill basic requests like finding lost items and delivering packages, which was considered one of the easiest tasks as an adventurer. The higher one climbs the rank, the more demanding requests start to be, with basics being defeating a monster and gathering rare materials. It is based totally on the experience of how and what kind of request a person is getting. In addition to all of that, he could even join a party or form a new one all by himself if he wants to operate in a group and not alone. She then wished him the best of luck for higher ranks and gave him a clarification that violence within the guild is totally prohibited. As the explanation concluded, she asked for the registration fees of 5 silver coins, and he handed them over to her. She immediately asked him to place his hands over a crystal lying there. When Courier inquired about it, he came to know that it was something that would keep the information of the adventurer to itself so that other guilds across various locations could fetch that information and verify the same. Courier was much more interested in knowing about such a technical item. However, the lady immediately denied it, as she herself was not properly aware of it in the first place. Courier apologized for his behavior, and as commanded, he placed his hands over the orb. Something unexpected happened as he was able to feel a flow of nerves throughout his whole body, which was somehow taking information from him. As soon as the process was completed, it displayed the results. His full name was introduced there, and as the receptionist went on to read about the other skills, she came to know that the boy was holding spatial magic. She immediately called for someone else at the Adventure Guild, telling them about the listed magic. However, no one was aware of it, as the typical ones include fire, water, earth, wind, darkness, and others. In the middle of the conversation, they were still trying to understand what it really meant and if the guild master would be aware of it. However, Courier was eager to get himself registered, clarifying his position that he had not done something wrong, and even the registration book does not speak of the magic nature being a reason for registration accepted or rejected. The receptionist understood the point and then took out his plate, which certified his F rank and something that would give him a waiver from the toll fees, and was charged 3 silver coins in case he lost it. As soon as registration was completed, the receptionist asked him to take on some tasks, and then walked off, deciding to return once she was prepared. Courier immediately ran off to an isolated location in the city, and then used his spatial magic over one of the drums, which sliced it off in mid-air, something he had never expected. So he went on to test other skills, including spatial distortion. This skill somehow created a blank, wide space in the drum. Courier witnessed all of it and realized that his skill was not just a normal one, but something very overpowered. The reason he was able to perform those skills was because he touched that crystal at the guild, which flooded him with all the magic information from that world. Actually, spatial magic did not exist in that world, and since it was all new, it was just absurd to be uncharted by whatever lies within it. Courier understood that this power was given to him by the mysterious voice that brought him to the location. But he was not able to understand the reason behind giving him that power, as it felt like he was on some kind of special mission in a manga. All he was able to understand was that the reason he was given this power was because he wanted to go far away. He then gave it a thought if the magic could also help him in allowing movement of his own from one place to another. As he decided to try it out, he was stunned as the next moment, when his eyes opened, he was at a totally different place, moved from his earlier location where he was just a second ago. As he looked to another point in the city, he found it more amusing where he could have a greater view, so he instantly teleported himself to that location. This jump was pretty scary for a cause, as he somehow managed to get his position, but the sight he had from there was worth the risk as his eyes were delighted. At the moment, while he was standing there, he was getting a flashback where his father told him to take care of his own life by living the life he wants to live. He immediately started contemplating that, unlike his previous life, there were no tall buildings, cars, or trains, nor did he have to work as a corporate slave or deal with people constructing superficial relationships for their own selfishness. All this was giving him an indication that going far away and living freely just felt right. Courier was enjoying every moment he had from that location to the fullest. Remembering his dad's words and what the mysterious voice said to him, he realized that he was going to use that magic for his survival in another world to live his life as he always wanted. When the next day turned up to get his first job to earn his livelihood in another world, he got a quest of delivering some goods from one location to another. The boy continuously asked for more and more work from the receptionist. However, she furiously denied every request, telling him that just 2 were enough for the day because, in case he was not able to complete them, he would have to face a penalty right now with his rank of F. He could only handle manual tasks or volunteer work, and at the moment, the delivery quest suited him the best since the only means of transport there were horses and carts, and he had a great fear of handling monsters all by himself because he was just a corporate slave 2 days ago. The location from where he had to pick the goods was in the south, and the delivery was to the east, so before getting to the park, he immediately went to the top of the tallest building in the city, from where he could see almost everything in each corner of the capital. There was one downside to the teleportation magic. He could only teleport to the place where he had been before, so he needed to get a proper view from higher up so that he could visit it once and then go whenever he wanted to. As he pinpointed the house, he immediately used his spatial magic once again and then teleported to the doorstep immediately. Knocking on the door, he called up the individual from inside, reminding him about the delivery request. The guy was quite amused by the adventurer visiting quite early. He then pointed towards the chair that needed to be delivered to his granddaughter. As soon as Courier understood the task, he decided to go on with the work. Towards the chair, he raised his hand, and then used spatial storage to carry all of it into his storage space. As he was able to handle it, he himself was shocked that his magic was pretty convenient in every regard. His delivery pickup was completed, so he decided to go directly to the location where he needed to deliver it, and then again used his spatial magic to reach the nearest location and then walked off to the gate of the delivery spot. Knocking on the door once again, he called out for the owner, and this time, it was a girl who was quite amused with getting the delivery pretty early from her grandfather, who sent the chairs, which were quite heavy. She was expecting that it would take some time. As Courier blushed a bit, the lady with a bright smile praised him for his great work. This time, Courier got a flashback from his previous life, where he was always scolded, even if he had done something good, and had never received any appreciation for his good work. Taking in all the compliments, he gently bowed in front of her and then decided to take a leave from there. As a few days passed of his adventurous journey, one day when he visited the Adventure Guild, the receptionist called him for a moment. Somehow, even though she called him by his name, the boy was not able to remember her after the previous encounter. The receptionist introduced herself to be Kusha, one who handles the adventure job management. Courier remembered her as one of the receptionists who trusted him on the first day when his magic was visible on the crystal. Through various other encounters, the receptionist never believed when he completed the task in just a short span of time where the delivery was expected to take more than 1 or 2 days. In the end, he himself had to give her proof by showing his spatial magic illustrations, clarifying that he was really capable of what he had done. Now the way the lady was in conversation with him, it was clearly visible that she was acting like a bureaucrat. The same fear turned out to be true when she presented a quest for him where he had to deliver something out of the royal capital, all by himself. This was quite surprising as he was not expecting such a sudden change. So Kusha went on to say that since he was handling all the other tasks pretty well, the other new adventurers were in awe of his work. Courier somehow felt guilty for it, but Kusha calmed him down, telling him that jobs outside the royal capital would give him more synergy. Even though Kureto was pretty interested in the job, he realized that outside the royal capital, he had to face monsters on his way out. Even though his magic was pretty powerful, he was hesitant. Kusha interrupted him in the middle of his thoughts to tell him that in case he opted for the quest, she would recommend him for a higher rank, which would somehow act as a raise in his salary too. That motivation was enough for Kureto to accept the request without any further clarification because, in his present condition, he could not say no to a pay raise in any case. The scene turned outside the capital, and it was a bright sunny day where Kureto was on his way for the quest, and was quite amused with the beautiful landscape visible from outside the royal capital wall. Using his card, which he got on the first day, he got a waiver from the city tax, and that is why it was true that the benefits of being an adventurer were significant. The request for the day was to deliver some amount of money and a letter to one of the villages, and this was a greater responsibility than handling other items. Kureto was aware that this would take a lot of stamina for the delivery, and it was a perfect trial for a rank up. A wonderful breeze was blowing around, and he was getting soothed by the sensation of it, as well as the view he was having at the moment. Kureto used teleportation and was able to cover a part of his land using his magic. Even though it was pretty fast, he was tense as the village was very far away. As per the map he was holding right then, a seagull was flying in the sky, which caught his attention, and he gave a thought to traveling to the location through the air. In the middle of his contemplation, he was shocked when, the next moment, he found himself in mid-air, startling the seagull. He himself was surprised a lot, knowing that he was able to pull a move like that. As gravity was playing its role, pulling him back onto the earth, he decisively used the spatial magic once again to travel more parts of the location. It looked good that he could just teleport into mid-air and did not have to face long walks to reach his destination. Moving forward, he was enjoying the use of his magic more and more because he was getting a feeling that he was flying in the air like a child in a dream. Everything down was clearly visible from above, and he noticed that there were some goblins in the forest who were listed as the target for extermination at the guild. Being from Japan, it was the first time he had seen something like that. From the information, there were not to be more monsters during the way, but there surely was a straggler, which gave him a flashback when he used his magic as a trial on the drum the last time. In contemplation, he was really not at all interested in battling with those monsters, but he could not rule out that he would not have to face them later in life, so he immediately went down and stood firm in front of the herd of those monsters, holding their weapons in hand. The goblins seriously did not like that someone was challenging them from up front, appearing out of nowhere. As all three of them moved towards Kureto, he found that it was a perfect opportunity for practice, so he raised his hand and then used a spatial slash, which dissected one of the goblins into two before it could even launch a move. This attack was witnessed by the other two standing at the back of it, and from their appearance, it was visible that they were terrified as they had never faced such magic. However, before they could even respond, Kureto immediately used spatial distortion to eradicate their presence in one hit, making them lose their lives. For the first few seconds, Kureto was just stunned at his location. After coming back to his senses, he realized that he had done it without any practice. The scenery was really nothing pleasant to look at, and since he had never killed any animal in his previous life, he was feeling more guilty this time. Realizing his situation, he felt that he held the most crucial and powerful magic, so he needed to be cautious. He then wiped off the thought of taking down a goblin as just a cockroach. Moving forward around sunset, Kureto was near the mountains, and to the side of it he could see his destination village surrounded by a wall, also called Howland village. Kureto went on foot from the air, and as he visited, he found a young man standing at the gate, holding a spear as he was the guard protecting the main gate, and was curious about knowing Kureto. Kureto was first intimidated by the physique of that man, and he then introduced himself as an adventurer who was there to complete the quest. It was pretty unusual for someone from the capital to come to complete a quest in the first place. As he clarified that he was holding a letter and some money, the man was even more surprised. His expression totally changed after going through the names for which the delivery was, as in his eyes, those guys were earlier adventurers whose real character had never changed. The guard was acting too friendly with Kureto, and he even called him a cheerful person. However, Kureto's intentions were just to complete the quest and get back to the capital as soon as he could. The guard told him that it was already late enough, so they could hold the task of delivery to the next day. Kureto understood and realized that he was surely not going to interrupt someone's dinner, so he would complete the task the next morning. After agreeing to it, he decided to walk back towards the royal capital. The guard immediately stopped him, telling him that there was no location where he could stay in such a small village, and then, grabbing him from behind, asked him to pay a visit to his home and believe it was his own. Curito found it pretty awkward, and even though he could just teleport from the location, he was not able to say no, as the boy was dragged down by the guard to his place. It was a small cottage, and as both of them reached home, the man screamed to tell about his presence and was welcomed back by a beautiful lady, perfectly dressed, having a curiosity about whom he brought along this time. Being modest enough, Curito immediately introduced himself as an adventurer, and the lady was introduced to be Stella. The guard's name was Andrew, even though it was his own mistake. He left all of it over the head of Curito. Stella clarified that this was his real and budding character, but Curito was just grateful that he offered him that place to spend his night. Stella asked both of them to get inside as she was going to prepare the food for the dinner. The moment Curito walked around, he realized that the place was really cozy and quite different from what it used to be in Japan, as people used to wear shoes inside the home. Both of them went to the first floor, and there they were welcomed by a young kid to whom Andrew introduced as his daughter, Nina. Out of instinct, Curito went on his knees and then greeted the child, introducing himself as an adventurer and someone who was thankful for her dad's kindness. Nina was also delighted to have a guest at her home after so long, and Curito was relieved that unlike everyone else in his previous life, this was not a troublesome child. The conversation was immediately interrupted by Andrew, who was not at all happy with the boy being clingy with his daughter. While he was still giving him devil threat stares, Stella pulled him through his ears, asking him to leave them behind and not interrupt, as she herself was in need of help in the kitchen. Andrew agreed to it, being in pain, but before heading out, he clarified to his girl that the boy came from the royal capital. Those words brought a different kind of brightness onto the lady's face, and she was delighted to have even more information. Now she was looking at the guest with totally different eyes, being all excited about different kinds of stories, but the boy was not able to understand what the delight was all about. Stella clarified that in a rural place like that, the stories from travelers were of great entertainment. She wanted him to be a companion of the daughter, and as Curito understood the task, he was ready for it. However, Nina's father somehow didn't like that. After a while, the food was properly served on the table, and the dinner was prepared with two of the kids in the house drooling to have the sight of it. Curito found the cuisine to be pretty delicious, and as Andrew was offering him some drinks, he gradually accepted, finding the smell, when it was served, to be pretty hard, like it was just fresh. Andrew clarified that the wine was prepared in the village itself with the help of the grapes, so the quality was good. When both of them cheered their glasses, Curito realized that it was all rich as well as tasty too. Those guys were not stopping and clarifying that what they were having at the moment was grown inside the village by their individuals, and it was quite sufficient. Curito went on to enjoy the food and found that it was pretty tasty and praised the cooking style of the lady, which was acknowledged by the other two sitting on the dining table. The sight at the moment, which Curito was having while sitting on the dining table, having dinner with other family members, again pushed him to go into his flashbacks through his rough memories where his mother passed away at a young age. His sudden change of expression was noticed by Andrew, but he dodged the answer, telling that he was thinking of having his own field one day. Andrew found it a great opportunity and then asked him to leave the job and join him in farming in the village. Somehow, Curito was not buzzed with this suggestion. He decided to give it a thought when his life just settled down a bit in terms of his livelihood. On the next day, Curito was still sleeping on the bed, where the corporate instinct of work was continuously haunting him as soon as the sunlight was on his eyes. However, his thoughts were busted with a sudden kick on his cheeks, and it turned out that the boy slept with Nina, and she was currently in an awkward position, having the best sleep of her life with her uncle. He gently got up, laying Nina on the bed, and then went downstairs, noticing that Stella was already up and was engrossed in her day-to-day chores. He had the best sleep in Andrew's pajamas, which he borrowed the last night. However, Nina was still not awake. Curito did not bother to raise her up as she was comfortable sleeping. During all that time, Curito was wondering if her father, Andrew, was okay, because the last night when Nina showed a resolve of sleeping with Curito so that she could hear adventure stories from the capital, her father did not like that at all, as he was worried for her daughter a bit more. Stella was aware that the guy just cared for her daughter more than anything, and the statement was supported by Andrew, who came from behind and clarified that it was natural since he was a father of an only daughter. Still, even after continuous entry, Andrew was not happy with a stranger sleeping with his daughter, so he questioned if he did something wrong with her late at night, even though he was the one checking upon them every 30 minutes throughout the night. Breakfast was ready for the morning, so Stella asked them to freshen up, and as he looked at the dish, Curito immediately ran off to wash his hands. After a while, when they were done with the breakfast, both Curito and Andrew decided to go and complete the quest. While walking from the fields, Curedo found it quite peaceful and went on to call it a nice village. This was a sudden reaction, as every time Andrew had heard young people call it pretty boring. However, in the eyes of Curedo, being bored was a kind of luxury because, in a flashback when he was just trying to survive, he had no time even to give it a thought that there existed a perspective like this. The first thing in order to get bored was to have time to think of it, and just then the thought instinctively pinned in his head that the kind of sound sleep he had last night was the first one after coming to this world. During the last night, he was all indulged in answering the questions of the curious girl who was interested in knowing about the kinds of people who live in the city. After he had told her a lot of stories, the boy was exhausted and clarified that he had visited the royal kingdom just a few days ago himself. He told her that his native place was really far and it was tough for him, something not a very good place. The little girl was pretty moved by those words, so she gave him a blessing that everything from then on would be good and lots of fun would arrive. Thinking about all that happened last night, they somehow reached the destination where Curedo had to deliver the letter and the money to complete the quest. It was Greg and Taylor's family home, and Andrew decided to call both of them by himself so that they should not be startled by a stranger's presence. It turned out to be an old couple who gave an introduction by their sons' and daughters' names and were greeted by the adventurer while he handed them over the goods, which he brought from the royal capital for them. The old man was not able to understand what was in the baggage, and as he clarified that it contained money, it was pretty suspicious, as every time it had only been just letters. Those old guys read upon it, and then told that even though the boy was in an F rank, he had a lot of trust from the guild, raising concerns in Cureto if there was something written about him in the letter. Actually, the whole letter was about himself, which told that the boy would deliver the money as well as the letter along, or in short, it was a test to see if the boy would not pickpocket some money. Curedo did not like such an act pulled upon him in order to test and then questioned about the total amount to be correct. On getting a confirmation, he realized that the receptionist was mean, and he was then thanked by those guys for playing his role and delivering the letters. Both Andrew and Cureto, with a bright smile on their faces, walked back, knowing that their quest was completed, and so it was time for Cureto to leave the place. Andrew asked that before he should go, he should say him at his home, and the boy thanked them for whatever he had done to his best. As said, Cureto visited Andrew's place, where Nina was not at all happy with the boy leaving suddenly. Being a kind man, Cureto tried to explain his situation, where he was bound to leave. Nina took a promise from the guy that he would visit back once again, and as Cureto shook hands with her, he again got a devil stare from her father, who didn't like him being touchy, as the boy really was behind his daughter. Cureto decided to clarify that the girl was very young for his current age. However, to the old man, he was just barely 18 in his head. Cureto clarified that they were way off, as his current age was 27. This statement turned out to be a jaw drop for the couple, who were not at all expecting that number and were quite surprised. In another sense, the boy was just 1 year younger than Andrew. Now the statement was surprising for Cureto, as he felt that the man was much older, but before that he clarified that Nina was cute. However, he was not into her, considering the age. Stella decided to knock off the conversation and immediately asked Cureto to take some bento along with him. As the boy was contemplating having more of Stella's cooking, he just decided to get whatever he could get his hands on before leaving. Cureto gently thanked them for everything they had given, and the family waved their hands, expecting to meet him the next time he visited the place. On his way back, Cureto realized that those guys were very kind to a stranger, and it meant that they were nice people, and he had peace after so long at that place. He was getting an intuition that he was a part of his family, and his resolve was to come back to the place once life got easier. For now, he decided to head back to the guild, as the task at that place was completed. Later in the story, Cureto told that once he left the village after completing the quest, he was successfully ranked up to E and had 2 major perks through it. It was that he had taken on more delivery jobs, which was increasing his opportunity and boosting his completion speed, and the second was just that he had increased his pay for each job which he was performing. At the moment, he was earning more than other adventurers, and somehow this was not going to be a good act, as one day when he was at the Adventurers Guild, some adventurers surrounded him, questioning about the shady tactics which he was playing in order to earn higher than the others in just a short span of time. It was clearly visible that Cureto was not in a good position, neither was there any rule stating that the boys shall perform subjugation tasks. Those guys were not happy that such a low-key kind of adventurer was earning more than them by just performing some delivery tasks. However, Cureto was not able to understand what his next move should be. Just then, he remembered the statement from the receptionist, which he heard on the first day, that internal conflicts between the guild members are not allowed. However, this time, that thing was not making any sense as they were ready to beat him down to a pulp for whatever he was doing and not responding. Other guys from the location started to make a hurdle at the point, and everyone was freezing to get the battle started, as it was a kind of entertainment for them in the royal capital. Now and then, they were even betting upon the contenders of the battle, and with that, Courier was able to understand that he was really ambushed, and he had no way out from there until he fought them. From there, he started to get a flashback, how people used to get into battles in the city when he was on some delivery duties, and at the moment, he could directly use the daily tactic to escape from the location. However, it will not act as a proper solution to remove the roots. He could not win the battle with bare hands, and also other magic attacks will not be a good choice. However, just then, a thought budged in his mind. He wondered what would happen in case he showed those guys his teleportation magic, which will act as a promotion strategy, which will give him some kind of business opportunity later on. One of the adventurers tried to understand what the boy was mumbling all by himself, and as they questioned about it, the boy firmly denied, stating that he would not bend his way of doing business, and in case they have any problems, they can take actions as required. Those guys, hearing those comments coming out from a newbie, were left with no other choice. All of them decided to attack him at once. Courier was not even budged a bit, as he immediately used his spatial magic to take them all into midair while they were all stunned, as they were not at all expecting such a move from him. The next moment when they looked down, they were not able to understand how and when they came to that place, and as usual, gravity was working well and was pulling all of them towards the ground, and in the middle of all of it, the boss who was in charge of bullying the man had already lost his consciousness. While they were trying to understand that it was Courier who did all that, Courier decided to tell them that through the weights they were carrying at the moment, if they hit the ground from that height, they were going to die. This was more than terrifying for those guys who were not aware of what consequences they had to face in case they fought such a boy, and Courier was not even budging a bit while they were baying continuously for their lives from the man, apologizing for whatever they had done. Courier helped them and then used the spatial magic once again to take them down on the floor. The crowd that was surrounding them at the moment was totally in shock, as they were not able to understand what really happened and how they came back out of the sudden. Courier took the opportunity to tell that it was his magic, which allowed instant long-distance travel, and while they had not heard of any such kind of magic, they asked for more clarification and elaboration on the same. Courier proposed to them that he was ready to support their travels by helping them in instant teleportation to the destination without any hurdles. He thought of it as a new way of making money by transportation of adventurers from one place to another, and it was going to be a great business as the current world has a lack of transportation facilities other than horses and carriages. Further, with the help of it, he can even negotiate with them for higher pay than what he gets by delivering goods. In the eyes of Courier, there was a huge benefit for everyone, and through heated discussion, Courier was able to understand that all of them were in confusion, and he might have made a mistake. One gloomy girl came out of the crowd, questioning what was his good intention in that help, and as being a merchant-minded, he instantly answered that he will be charging them for every ride, and they could save time as well as effort with it. The price that he was going to charge for the travel was 2 silver coins, which was quite pricey in the eyes of those adventurers who were aware that a shared carriage will cost them only 2 copper coins, so it really was quite on the higher side, and while he was just in the middle of his thoughts, someone interrupted from the crowd and agreed for the bargain, giving him the first task of transporting Thunder Sword. Other guys were not able to understand why he was ready to take such a risk, while Courier found it amusing that he got his first customer. Even when there were questions raised, the man who accepted the bargain, thinking of it being a great opportunity, decided to walk off along with Courier to make him introduced towards his party, which includes Rox, Helena, and Alna. The captain of the group was Reed, the four-eyed guy who brought him to the place, while his party members did not really agree on the price cost which he was charging for teleportation. Reed told them a total calculation of how the price was quite cheap, starting from the regular carriage costing 2 silver coins, including daily meals and miscellaneous expenses, and since those guys really drink a bunch, it cost them even higher, and when explanation was granted, 2 of the members agreed because they were the ones who were spending a lot at the moment in the party. Reed believed that what the cost Courier was charging was pretty feasible, as it will save them time as well as energy, and they can take on high-paying jobs and perform more than 2 requests in a day in order to survive. One of the greater additions to the group was that they had not to worry about the monsters, which attacked them when they traveled to the destination. As soon as the explanation was completed, those guys were pretty delighted, and Helena even jumped towards Courier for apologizing for being rude just a while ago. Reed was planning to climb against all other adventurer parties who were aiming for the rank by rising up into the profits, and with that, all of them aimed towards reaching rank A. All of this conversation was being heard by someone who was standing in an alley. The man was quite amused after knowing that there was someone who was holding a teleportation spell, which was pretty interesting for him. Just the same day, at one of the cafe areas, Courier was sipping on the tea while continuously looking at a sand clock, which was telling him that it was almost time. On the other hand, at the destination of the battle, the Thunder Group had already been indulged in battling with the monsters, and this time even the monsters were scared to their toes. Just a few hours ago, Courier was the one who instantly transported them to the destination, which was going to take them 3 days with the help of a wagon, and still, they were in disbelief. Courier again clarified that he could only help in transportation to a location where he had earlier been, and since it was pretty faster, Reed paid the cost of 2 silver coins as requested. Courier was feeling quite a steal this time, as he had not to do any tiring work in order to earn the livelihood which he got at the moment. Those guys informed that it was going to take 2 hours to complete the task, and Courier decided to sip tea at the royal capital, and one of the adventurers did not like it that he would rest and the others would be working. Alan somehow tried to slip off from the battle along with Courier, but later was caught by them, and the guy then waved off to Courier, asking him to come after 2 hours as planned. As commanded, returning to the present, it had already been 2 hours, and Courier immediately shifted back to the location, and the moment he landed, it looked like Devil was waiting for him on the other end, as Helena was about to slice off his head out of instinct. Our boy was really terrified with such an act, but Helena clarified that it was just not intentional, and the plan was going to be teleporting to a far place rather than on the spot. On getting confirmation that they went really well, they had captured the monster pretty easily. Courier immediately praised them for their good work, finding out the next location where they needed to be. Reed, earlier to that, wanted to inquire if Courier could help them in storing the material items and get a reward in return too, as it will be helping them in bringing back all the material. That was a pretty good negotiation, as once they will be on multiple requests, they will gather more material, and hence, there will be a requirement for inventory. However, they could skip off all the slack by just asking Courier to handle it. Courier charged 3 copper coins for the same, and as the guy was wondering about handing him over an empty bag or something, Courier immediately took out the same from his spatial magic, stunning all of them, as it looked like he was a cheat code in that world. All the guys were pretty jealous of his magic skills, and they also wanted to have a hand over it. Everyone was finally recognizing his abilities, and the boy was really glad of it, so they decided to move on to the next target location for the timing. The teleportation was once again done in an instant, and the trip of 3 days long was cut short to a few seconds, and with that, the group was successfully able to complete 2 requests in a single day, which was impossible in real regards. At the guild, when those guys received the payback for their request, they were pretty astonished, as it was a lot more than they had expected. Even after paying Courier the charge he had asked for, Courier gently expressed his gratitude, while the others thanked him and apologized for being rude earlier, praising him for being a nice guy, and somehow, with their words, it was pretty clear that those guys wanted him to be a part of their party. Everyone in the team was ready to welcome him as a part of them. However, Courier immediately denied it, stating that he was not planning to be an adventurer forever, but he was ready to give them service whenever it was a requirement in case of a discount, since they were the first customers after all. While all those guys were in the middle of the discussion, that was being heard by the Adventurers Guild by other parties who were believing that whatever the guy had said was really the truth, since the good reputation was finally built. It had been a few weeks since he had started the services, and they had a lot of success then. He had earlier had a lot of requests coming these days. Soon, the number of clients increased, and the work had also stabilized, with him being named as the teleport service. On a fine day at the Adventurers Guild, Kusha was not looking pretty happy, and when she called Courier by his teleport service name, he somehow didn't like that and blushed. Kusha was furious all along, and she, in the middle, was being modest. However, she decided to shake off that expression to command him in order to slow the pace of transporting adventurers a bit, as every team is completing the requests at an unprecedented speed. He was not ready for that explanation, as just a few days ago, even the guild master had paid a visit to him and praised him for his good work, since his reward had increased due to the completion rate. However, Kusha was not at all happy, so she based her hands onto the table to tell that the old man just shows up once in a complete month, not aware of what his true duties were, and so she again clarified to him that if that will be the case, then all the guild member staff will be loaded with overwork, and they will have to leave. This time, the words were not as furious as they were a while ago, but it looked like that she was asking for some sympathy from him, and with that, Courier was able to understand what the real cause was, because the lady was working herself to the bone, and she was also acting in the shoes of a corporate slave. All other than that, Courier had also realized that the magical energy is not exactly infinite, because his heavy teleportation loads had started making him dizzy, and the fatigue was felt all over his body due to it. Courier had now decided to take a break from the venture, and while he was walking down the corridor, someone called him from behind, confirming his identity, and then greeting him with hello. That was the same guy who earlier was sneaking upon Courier, and his appearance was really like a Hollywood actor. However, he was not aware of his real identity, and so he inquired about the same. The guy introduced himself as Amelio, a merchant, and the man standing behind as Rodney, his employee. Getting straight to the point and answering to the face of Courier, he requested him to be a partner. However, this totally changed the expression of Courier, who was expecting that the guy was really in love with him, and he wants to marry, and his mind even went into another world. Amelio immediately clarified on the position and the meaning of partner there, as the confusion was really shaken off. He rephrased the statement, asking him to join his guild. Through those words, the guy was able to understand that he wanted him to do the transportation work. Amelio himself had done all the evaluation while keeping an eye on him, and he was pretty impressed with his transportation skills, which cut short the time of even 1.5 weeks of travel to instant, and he was pretty sure that using his ability, they could easily procure and sell goods to yield profit effortlessly. Courier realized that the guy had really done his part of the homework and was a careful one, so he told that his real intention was to earn money, and those words were enough for Amelio to realize that the boy was ready to accept his offer. He immediately asked him to cut the excitement short and then inquired about the name of the company which they were talking about at the moment, and he introduced it to be Amelio Trading Company, with him being the president of it. It was pretty lame to hear, as it looked like that he had made it just a few seconds ago, so Amelio clarified that even though it was not well known, and Courier had never heard of the company, even after him being aware about everything that is happening in the royal capital. He read Courier as a lame guy, but he was far more understanding and stiff, so he himself gave a clarification that he opened the company just a few days ago. Amelio was sure that the guy might be disappointed after hearing that, and it was pretty true with the expressions of Courier, because he himself wanted to represent his name with a big trading company. Amelio immediately denied his perspective, stating that he should not use a well-named company, and the reason was pretty simple, that it was about connections. The larger the company will be, the more he will be tied down to work, and the profit will be taken away by a lot of members. He again reminded him of his real reason why he joined an adventurer's guild, where he wanted to be free from any kind of foundations, and this thing even forced him to work as a freelancer of transportation rather than getting indulged in scary battles. He was aware that in a large company, the guy will just become a cog machine, and Courier was even shocked with such information being held by someone who was approaching to hire him as an employee. With all that, Amelio clarified that his company was far more feasible than any other, and since they had only 2 members, they can take on jobs whenever they want without any foundation, and the guy was also ready to pay him his fair wage. On inquiring about the sales channels, he clarified that he had started working upon the same, and the next question was pretty known, as Courier was not sure that he was holding upon the funds to buy goods. He decided to flex his current position and then handed him over a bag full of 50 gold coins, which was enough for him to buy a small house in the royal capital, depending on the location, and as Courier gave it a thought, he realized that in case if he was able to handle that much money, then he surely was not a normal man, but a big inspiration. Courier was thinking that it was the initial fund which they were going to use for their company. However, Amelio denied, stating that it was his first reward if he takes the job. Courier was stunned that his wage was going to be set for 50 gold coins. However, Amelio denied, stating that it was for a single-day business, and this was just the base wage rate, which will increase as their business grows. Courier was really not at all ready with such a statement coming out of his mouth, but Amelio was not budged in his statement, as he was sure that he could earn even greater profits. In case both of them joined hands, Courier was still in quite delusion of what just happened in a few minutes, and after reading the situation continuously, he realized that even if the business fails, he was not at all at stake, and it would be a gain for him in any case. Other than that, he was finding this man standing in front of him quite amusing, and with all that conclusion, he decided to start working with the guy, and both of them shook hands, and it was the founding day of the Amelio Trading Company, with 3 individuals starting with nothing in their hand. Just on the next day, when Courier yawned and went out of his inn, which marks the first day of the Amelio Trading Company, he found that the president himself was taking care of the boxes, and they were going to start their part of the job immediately. Courier wished his fellow colleague a good morning, however, he didn't receive anything back, so the master clarified that the guy was just a bit shy. Courier had managed to get some sleep that night, and the location which they had used to keep it as the shop was nothing more than just a storefront. Everything was perfectly riled up, and Amelio still believed that if both of them shook their hands and walked together, then it would keep them to the stars every time. Courier realized that there had not been even a single drop of confidence from his statements, and just then, the guy inquired about Courier's magic, as he had some questions in his head. The first one was how far he could teleport and move goods, and further, he even wanted an illustration of how he used to store material in his spatial storage. Courier was somehow not ready with the answers at the moment, but he decided and praised him again for his homework. Amelio had decided the place where they needed to teleport first as an illustration, and as he gave him a demo test, then moving to the next topic, he asked to show what storage feature he had in his magic. Courier immediately opened up his spatial magic space in front of him, and somehow he didn't get the compliment which was waiting from the man after he opened it up. He certified that he had handled other materials in that space, and there had been not a single issue, and the space has also helped in keeping the material intact with its original condition, so they don't have to worry about the freshness of the material. In short, these guys can even bring fresh fish from a harbor and sell them directly to the royal capital. Amelio was aware that they could do it right away, however, flooding the market with the requirements of the customer will not be a great move, as they might sell that material to the upper class of the society at a premium, and he realized that the boy was really good in thinking about making profit at an instant without any second thought. Once they reached the location of what Courier needed to store in his spatial magic, he found that there was a cart fully loaded with material, and somehow these guys were waiting for him to use his spatial magic in order to store the whole cart, as loading and unloading the material was a hassle. Amelio believed that this could not be done, and it somehow hit Courier right on his ego, so he immediately used his spatial magic to store the complete wagon inside of it, shocking the other two standing behind. However, this time, this was also a new discovery for Courier himself. The act was completed. Amelio was not able to stop himself from laughing, and he laughed pretty hard, shocking Courier, as it was quite sinister, and explaining upon it, Amelio told that it was quite a revelation that he had found someone like him who was totally out of an ordinary league. The merchant believed that if they had that kind of power, then they could smuggle anything, and Courier was not at all expecting such a statement from him, and it turned out to be a false joke, which relieved Courier that he wanted to earn money honestly without any risk. Courier immediately used his spatial magic to transport them to a village out of the royal capital, and when the task was completed within an instant, Amelio was happy. On questioning about his visit to such a remote village, he clarified that the place was really close to the neighboring country of Madhad, and since the trade was totally thriving, they could deal in their facilities right away. Courier was aware that the facilities include the spices and the dried goods, including the delicate textiles, and since the prices are nearly the same as in that village to the neighboring country, they can easily buy the material at cheap rates. The place really had such great potential, and since, in order to get the material in the royal capital, people used to travel through the mountains and face monsters, which was the troublesome part, it could be really beneficial to them. Other than that, only a few merchants were really aware, and the others used to travel to the country to pay taxes and get the material. He realized that he had been there multiple times delivering letters, however he was not aware of that kind of information to the extent the merchant was aware of. The complete situation was giving a clear clarification that they are going to buy specialties at the cheap rate and sell them at a high rate under the royal capital, and it was the true essence of the business in the first place. Amelio believed that the mantra was true, but putting it to practice was a tricky part. However, when he looked at Courier, he realized that with him, it was just a piece of cake. Without waiting for a second, he commanded both of his employees to get to test the material in a short span, and as soon as possible, he understood that Amelio was going to take his sweat as well as blood for whatever because he was paying worth of work. As the trading company was up and running, Courier was asked to travel multiple places at Amelio's command, where they acquired unique food, craft, textiles, and other things, and then sell them at a premium to a distant land where the demand was high with the additional information which was available to the merchant. They combined it with natural charm and exceptional communication skills. He was quick and allowed the company to rise within the ranks of the trading companies across the nation. And just 3 months later, the Amelio Trading Company trading house was far bigger than it used to be earlier as just a storefront. The place was filled with exclusive items shining all over the place, and when Courier paid a visit, he realized that the company had really grown impressive, and they have multiple employees currently. The trading company had even been named something where an individual can find anything at any point of time, and Courier realized that the stability will surely come if they continued with the good work in just a few years. Courier was aware that everything that they had at the moment was because of the clever guy who was sitting behind the closed doors, and as he reached the office, he found that the guy was still working on the table, and he gently welcomed Courier to his place. Courier informed that he had done his part of the day, including placing them to the back. However, Amelio was still in need of his help at the moment. Courier was aware that the guy was now able to source material without the help of his teleporter, and Amelio kind of missed that time when he wrecked off continuous work from that guy, and it was like a nightmare for him where he never wanted to return to. Courier was still working because the wage was quite high, but Amelio believed that it was worth it. The reward for the day was kept for him on the table, and Courier had to collect it, and he realized that the Hollywood actor was working really hard. Amelio clarified that in any case he could not bring down the promise which he had made to the guy of binding him like a machine through continuous work, and as Courier showed some sympathy, Amelio asked him to work for the company throughout his entire life. Courier immediately denied in sheer rage. However, still, Amelio wanted him to settle in the place, reminding the guy that Courier had earned more than enough to live, and he asked him to enjoy life from there on. There was quite a 1-minute silence at the place, and no one uttered a single word, so Amelio left the decision towards him of how he wants to, as his own ambition was to make the company one of the best in the world, and he was always ready to get help from him in any case. Done for the day, Courier left the trading company, and while walking back onto the streets, he wondered how he was going to enjoy life, as ever since he came into the world, he was just working with the flow and had never thought about the future at all. He was so indulged in his day that he had not even given a thought of what he wants to do, and he was so lost in thought that he was even bumping into passers-by who were trying to bring him back to his senses, but still he was just worried and was wandering around, finding a place to settle down. Like the previous times, he found the tallest building in the capital and then immediately teleported to the location, and reaching again through the circle to the same place from where everything started, he remembered what the words were initially, where he had decided to use the spatial magic to live freely. Standing there, he went through the flashbacks back when he was in the guild and was working as a transporter. He had no complaints, and everyone was a good person, including Amelio, who was quite quirky as a boss. The boy was really fulfilled with whatever he was doing at the moment, and he himself had never made a good relation in his previous times, as once, when he lost his mother, he became afraid of leading people and never made connections with anyone, and that is why, when he lost his father, he was left with nothing. Right at the moment, he bowed his head, wondering what he was going to make in that other world, and was finding something which would be like a hometown for him, where he could find peace. In his closed eyes, the first face that popped up was of Nena, who was asking him to visit back again, and that was the first ray of hope where he was getting the glimpse of the family back at the village, whom he met during his adventure time. He got the perfect answer that the one point where he could travel back and enjoy his life was the village, and he himself wanted to see that family again in order to sit at the dining table, enjoy food with them. He wanted to live in that village and spend his days there only. However, he could not just throw away the company work, as it would not be fair to his friend. Right then, an idea shook his head, and he realized that he could do that with his magic and live in both the royal capital as well as the village like a dual life. The boy was firm that he didn't want to live a lonely life in any case, and he wanted to cherish connections with others and what he loved, and since he had the power at the moment to do so, he decided to give it a try to live a dual life between the royal capital and the village. Scenes turned to the village, where Nina was sitting in the garden, mumbling in her sweet voice, while preparing a very band of flowers, when someone called her from behind, and it was Courier standing. He gently waved towards her, expecting a wave back, and even gave his introduction, thinking that she would remember the sleepover at least. He was trying his best so that the lady could remember how they spent their best period. However, when there was not even a single bit of change on her face, he realized that the girl might have forgotten him. Just the very next second, her eyes glittered with hope, and she immediately recognized the guy and then ran off to him, questioning if he was there for another quest and about his health. After spending 2 of the toughest minutes of his life, Courier finally sighed in relief that the girl had not forgotten him when he had come after so long, saying he will come back early. Nina was pissed that the boy could think that she could forget, and she remembered everything, and as he was seeking reassurance from the lady, the kid immediately gave him back with a bright smile on her face, saying that the last day when he visited, They had the best time spent, and further thanked him for keeping the promise and coming back for the sight. Courier was somehow pleased with that expression. Both of them went directly to Nina's home, and Stella was quite surprised to see the previous guest once again back to the village. Courier gently greeted her, and Andrew was trying to clarify his position that Stella was not at all agreeing that he should stay at home for the day, as there was no work left behind for him to do then and there also. Stella asked him to stay for the night, and so she went on to prepare the bed, and once again Nina decided to sleep with Courier for that day too, and his father once again denied it. That expression was the same, which it used to be earlier, whenever it comes to the protection of his daughter, that Andrew never slacks off. The family was really caring in all aspects. At night, when they were sitting on the dining table and enjoying the wine once again, he was questioned about his lookout work. Someone else was taking care of it at the moment, when he informed me that he had some guests back at his place, which gave a clarification to the products that the people of the village are truly wonderful. He then told them that currently he was thinking of moving out into the same village, and it brought a smile on everyone's face in the family, who were really waiting to hear that statement, as everyone was delighted. Andrew was even asking them to go fishing, while happy that she could hang out with him more. Courier was not ready for such an expression coming out from them, as it was quite dramatic. However, Stella, being the housewife, was more concerned about how he was going to take care of his life from here on. She believed that if he works in the capital, then he will have more freedom and earnings than he would have at the place, so Courier clarified that he was earning money at the moment through trades, but the problem again was that he could not conduct a business in a place like that for sure. Courier told that he was going to continue his work in the capital, and with that statement everyone sitting in the room was totally blank, as they were not able to understand the meaning of it, that it was purely sounding unbelievable, so he told that his magic allows him to keep working in the capital while he could live there as well. Andrew was not even paying a bit of attention to whatever he was yapping, as it was not turning out to be true. In any case, he himself had never heard of such a magic existence in the first place, so Courier decided to show them rather than telling how it really works. He said that he was going to take everyone to the capital, and Nina was the one who was very excited, but Andrew had just lost all beliefs in his statements. The next moment, when he opened his eyes, he was in the capital, standing in the middle of it along with his family members, and was totally stunned. Looking around at the scenery and the location, he realized that it really was the royal castle, and Stella proclaimed that it was the real capital. Nina, on the other hand, was just excited as she was enjoying the view, finding the buildings gigantic and a lot of people compared to her village. As Andrew was still finding it a dream, Stella gave him a pinch to relieve him of pain and tell him that it was all true, and now he just wanted to get back home. Just the very next instant, Courier turned them back to their place, and Andrew was happy to be there while still wanting to spend a little more time. He gave her a promise that he would take her there again, and she was just happy that he was not aware of what kind of magic he held. Andrew understood that he wanted to live a dual-based lifestyle, which was quite interesting. Considering the cost, the man just told him that he was making a lot of money at the moment. Andrew just welcomed him right from the start, and he, along with his wife, asked him to stay and spend time together. Those guys were ready to give him everything whenever he would be in trouble, and were also looking forward to a celebration with a feast and drinks for the forthcoming of one of the family members. Courier finally found what he was searching for all along after coming to that other world, and he was having the brightest smile ever. On the next day, when he woke up, he was yawning and wandering outside the place. He found that he was at the village, and it was a pleasant sight to have in the morning when you wake up. It was fresh air and beautiful scenery, and he was happy that he could live in the village from there on, and it was the best decision in his eyes from where he came. He was still thinking of finding a place to live when Nina came from behind and hugged him, wishing him good morning and wondering what they were going to play for the day. She had a lot of things in her head that she wanted to do, but her father interrupted and reminded them that for the day they were going to look for a house. At the moment when he said those words, he was furious about him being clingy with his daughter once again. Courier immediately inquired about the steps they needed to perform in order to get a house, and then talked about all the things they needed to do to get one at the royal capital, which included paperwork, payments, and other things. He went into thought for a long while and then told them that there were no complicated processes like that when it came to the countryside, and all they needed to do was get the permission of the village chief to stay at that place. Once he could have that, he could decide on any empty place and build his own home, and the rule was the same for all rural areas. Courier was just surprised that there was that much difference between the royal capital and the countryside, and then questioned if it was easy to get permission. The expression and change of Andrew's face indicated that it was not going to be that easy due to his dual lifestyle, which he was planning to live, But to lift his morale even higher, he grabbed the boy from behind and told him that he would be the one watching for his house. He believed that since he had delivered letters to the place, they had a plus point in order to get permission. Even the little girl decided to vouch for him and asked the chief for permission, and with that, he believed that he really had a chance. They decided to finish Stella's breakfast and then pay a visit to the village chief's home, which was quite in the middle of the city. Leroy was introduced as the village chief, and when he understood the condition, he realized that he had quite unusual magic because he himself took a demonstration of the same, and the family also wanted to be there. However, it was very soon. Leroy gave it a thought, and based on the introduction and the character he had shown all the time, he had no objections to giving permission. However, he was much more interested in knowing what the reason was he chose their village. The village consisted of peace and lots of farmers who produced famous products, and he believed that with the magic he held, he had countless more options. Courier turned around and then gave a side glance to the family standing behind, and, with lowered eyes, told them that he currently had no family or a place he called home until he visited the place during one of his quests. He was gaining flashbacks from his previous life, where he was living all alone, and all he remembered about his father's words was that he wanted him to live the life the way he wanted to. The moment he came back to the village, he realized that he had a family in the form of Andrew and the others, who welcomed him without any selfish motives, and it was very warm for him, and it was the reason why he wanted to live in the place and nowhere else. He believed that this was the base for everything and that it was the kind of life he wanted to live. Leroy was totally moved by that statement, and as he understood that the boy was really concerned about the village, he welcomed him to the village. The little lady was also happy after gaining approval, and Courier just felt that Andrew was maintaining a distance while standing far behind in a quite unusual state. Nina told him that her father was just blushing, as whatever he said were kind, soft words, which she was not at all accustomed to, and Courier, understanding the condition after being an adult, decided to keep hold and not say those words again and again. As it was time that he had gained permission, Andrew decided to take him to the different empty houses, as he had all the keys. They were going to give it a try before trying to build a new one, and since Courier also didn't want to be a freeloader for a long period of time, he decided to choose one of the empty homes that would be enough for his survival. He was not going to build a new one, and renovation was the affordable option, so he decided to start from the cheapest one. The first house Andrew showed was totally a blend. The house was pretty old but regularly maintained. He decided to have something bigger, but Andrew showed it because it was in the village center, and the access was good. Andrew then took him to another home, which was at the top of the mountains, which was quite interesting, and when they paid a visit, it was perfectly built in the correct shape. The third one was just too big for him at the moment. Until then, whichever house they had seen, he didn't like any of them, and he realized that access was really important, as he could not just run away to an isolated place. He was not able to decide which place he needed to stay, and then they went to the last empty house, which was in the village, and it was a good-looking one with a perfect build and of the right size. Courier found the place quite amusing, and Nina was also interested in him choosing it, as it was near her home. Andrew had not shown him the place earlier because it was a bit too close to his own, and there used to be people living in the place just a few weeks ago, so Courier asked him not to worry about him visiting again and again to his home for dinner in any case. He found it amusing that he would be living closer to the family, which he always wanted to live with, and with that statement, Andrew was once again blushing, as he was never ready for that kind of appreciation in the first place. As the gate opened, Courier found that the place was quite neat and clean, in perfect shape, and had the perfect amount of space he was looking for. Everything was spacious, since there was a family with kids that lived there, and Andrew believed that it was pretty big for him. However, cleaning had never been a concern for Courier. He decided to organize the place as much as he wanted, and as Nina was playing around, she asked him to pay a visit to the second floor, which had plenty of rooms and a perfect build. The place really was too big for just one person, so he decided to use the others for storage and write that something else was of major concern. As the lady pushed him towards the back door, from where the true nature was visible, the scenery was quite amusing. Nina was aware of a lot of things, including the stream that used to pass by there because she used to play with the kids who resided there earlier. Courier believed that the place was best for sunny days where he could relax, and those guys decided to even enjoy a bonfire and grilled cheese with sausages when they could party around. Courier finally decided to run with this house as it fit directly to the choice of whatever he was thinking. Those guys went and reported the same to the village chief, and with that, the renovation of the house finally started as he hired some men for the same. There was not going to be a lot of remodeling, as Courier liked the interior of the house better than anything and was thinking of keeping the kitchen and the entrance as they were. More than anything, he wanted to move as fast as he could, rather than being a freeloader. They decided to go fishing for the day, so they could enjoy the rest of the time after being done there. While Courier was lost in his thoughts of living in the countryside, he remembered that he had a lot of work left back in the capital, and that thing reminded Andrew that he was left with a week of pending work. The place was feeling cozier than anything. Going back, Courier decided to buy some furniture if Amelio was busy with something. He immediately used his spatial magic and vanished from the location, and Andrew was again impressed with his magic skills. Back after reaching the capital, the moment he landed, he realized that it had been long enough since he had seen that place. While he was walking out, he decided to check with Amelio first and complete the rest of the work that was pending. Lunch was also going through his head, but the moment he crossed the street, he found Rodney standing aside, waiting for him, and it somehow startled him. On questioning his presence at the location, it was Amelio who told him to wait, as he might come back that day. The things were getting quite surprising for him, as now Amelio was even predicting futures. At the trading company building, Courier emerged directly using his spatial magic, and Amelio somehow was not looking pleased with him being absent for such a long period of time. He immediately apologized for being too comfortable, and since Amelio had really no urgent business, he just wanted to see his presence and then questioned how he had decided to enjoy his life. Courier told him the complete story of living both at the village and the capital at the same time, as it was quite amusing, and as he dreamed of having a spacious house, he was having the best back at the village. Amelio was aware that the people living there were of really good character, and Courier was happy that he got validation from one of the knowledgeable men for his decision. He even praised his decision and said that whatever he had chosen was at his own will and was true in his own regard, but then requested him to continue working with the trading company and not get too comfortable in losing sight. He believed that their company was still in its infancy, and there were some deals they could not crack if Courier was not there. While he was in thought of finding ways to make it great, he got an idea and then said that if Courier was thinking of having a jewel-based lifestyle, then he would have to own a place in the capital too. Courier had never given a thought to such a thing in the first place, but the moment he denied, Amelio just stood up in rage from his chair, making him believe that he really wanted to have his own place because if he lived in an inn, they would never be aware when he was coming back, and he could not leave Rodney standing, waiting for him without any information. He believed that if he had a home, several problems would be resolved, and in that case he pointed his fingers, shocking Courier, and told him that he was going to have a home for sure. Those words were enough to motivate Courier in agreement with those words, and it was just not the end, as Amelio even suggested hiring staff, which he was going to take care of all by himself. This was getting more and more, and Courier believed that Amelio was saying this with the mind of a merchant where he was earning money. And Courier believed that the more he was thinking of having a relaxing luxury, things were getting worse. There was a sudden change in expression on the face of the merchant, questioning if he could manage both houses back in the village and the capital all by himself, because even the counseling would be a tedious task, and there would be much worse things in case the houses were not maintained regularly. Amelio was trying to tell him that in order to maintain a house, he would require some kind of magic or house help. In response, Courier really didn't have any answers, and it was a win again for the merchant. And so he gave the final conclusion that if he was going to have a home there, then hiring staff would be the best option. Courier was aware that he was continuously falling into the pit created by that man, but he had really no answer against it, and it was pretty sure that the boy was asking him to own a home so that he could store it as company material when he was away. Amelio's expression was just telling what his real intention was, but he was happy that the guy was bold enough. The day finally arrived when they were going to view the capital houses. However, Courier was still not sure about it, and even though the merchant was very eager, he was still having thoughts about his home back in the village, which had no furniture yet. On the other hand, if looked through the perspective of a merchant, whatever that guy said was really true, so he decided to consider carefully for the house he was going to own. When he was walking once again, he bumped into someone in the royal capital, and before he apologized, the lady just walked off without paying any attention, and Courier contemplated her being well-dressed and gorgeous. The first house they visited was really a big mansion, and the same continued with the other two they had paid a visit to. Courier was just not able to understand why they were just seeing such big and pretty houses when he had to reside all alone. However, Amelio found that the bigger, the better. It was too much just for storage. Courier again clarified that all he needed was a great house to reside in and not a mansion in the first place. While the salesperson was trying to tell him that they were giving the top recommendation, considering he was a fellow friend of Lord Amelio. After a long discussion, they finally reached an agreement and then decided to change the place right away, and it looked like the guy was enjoying much more than Curato was, and through his eyes, it was visible that he was really concerned about Curato, not himself. Reaching the fourth location, when Curato was finding it embarrassing, Amelio just finalized the house and asked him to settle at the place, but Curato denied because it was just in front of the trading company, and he wanted him to do much more work than just resting. As the location changed and they viewed another house, it was going to be a more silent place in the corner of the royal capital, which was pretty and quietest. Actually, the place was vacated by a noble who used to live there, and it was away from the central area, so it was peaceful and secure. When they reached the location, the salesperson showed them a house that was pretty huge and cozy, while even though it did not have any flashy rich vibe of classic design, it was all because of the noble who used to live at the place who wanted a cozy and modest lifestyle. And since the views of his and the previous owner matched quite well, he found that he might end up choosing it. Those guys went inside and found that it was very spacious and quite extraordinary in appearance, but the place was very peaceful irrespective of the size it was. The place was fully equipped with fire and water magic tools, and since it was very convenient, the place was also equipped with a bath. Curato was much more interested in knowing that part, as it was a ridiculously spacious bath, and that was all he wanted in the first case. It took him some time to come back to normal and understand that having a bath was pretty normal in that world, but not in Japan for sure. Just the bath was enough to get a confirmation from the guy that he was going to buy the place, and as he asked for the price, the salesperson told him that it would be around 50 gold coins, and considering the discount, she was going to charge 40. Curato was ready with the amount and considered that the price was not that wrong. However, the merchant immediately refused and asked for a slightly lower price. She was confused, and the salesperson turned the price down to 30, considering the request was directly from Lord Amelio. Amelio further decided to bargain and gave her agreed for the product she wanted earlier, which would have a good impression on the higher-ups, and she brought down the price from 50 to 25 coins. Still, Amelio was not impressed and decided not to give her the product, and to Curato, the conversation was just looking very scary. The deal was finally closed for 15 gold coins, and Amelio found it beneficial for them. Curato was able to understand that whatever negotiation the merchant had done for him, he was going to repay through the work, and the same thing he reconfirmed while whispering in the ears of the guy. However, he turned it down, saying that the work that the guy brought him on the table, this minor negotiation was just nothing in return. His statement once again changed when he clarified that he was going to store the materials of the company at that place, which would be of a great deal, so he needed not to worry. As 3 days passed at the place, Amelio called up Curato to tell him that the renovation at the place was finally completed, as only minor repairs were required, including the cleaning, and the furniture was also in good condition. It was Amelio who asked them to hurry and had kind of bullied the trading partners, and since the preparation for the staff was also complete, Curato was having an image of an old butler who was going to take care of the place. The moment they entered the place, he was still asking about the staff, and the first glance that Curato had inside of it was a lady who was waiting for them to give them a warm welcome at the place. Things worsened when it was not just one, but 3 more were standing aside, and Curato was stunned to think that he was going to be in the care of those little kids who would take care of the place. He was not able to understand why the kids were currently the servants, but those guys told him that they were in charge of managing the place on their own, and the First Lady introduced herself as Elsa, and it was quite a warm greeting. Curato was really not too familiar with the girls and was quite embarrassed, so he turned towards the guy to tell him that he should have informed him earlier about having female servants, and he was not at all interested in the fact that they were beautiful. Listening to the surname, he even reckoned that those were nobles, and he even got confirmation from Elsa that she was from the worker family. Being the 4th daughter, she was acting as a servant, and the others were also not less than from a baron, who were also considered nobles. The other 3 girls also introduced themselves along with their last names, and since these girls volunteered themselves to the company to learn various things, it was pretty common for noble daughters to serve as maids to gain education. He turned towards his trading partner for dumping kids in the mansion, but Amelio acted like he was not at all aware of what he had done in the first place. In the world, most people with family names were considered to be nobles. However, not all nobles were high-ranking, and it was not uncommon for the youngest child to serve as a maid. However, the most important problem was that these girls were all daughters of business partners who were top clients, and since Curato was the one who had dealt with them during the trading days, he was all familiar with that. Their age at max was 12 to 15, with Elsa being the eldest, and every word of it was quite harsh upon Curato, as he really could not treat servants well like them, but for Amelio, it was still amusing. Courier was expecting that there must be at least one male staff member in the group. However, Amelio believed that he would have been more comfortable with beautiful women rather than just a rude man. Courier still was not at all impressed, as he believed that his life was far better at the village rather than in the capital, and Amelio, like he was saying that the woman he was searching for at the moment was in the village, not there. The ugly face of Courier was a clear indication that he had read the mind totally wrong, and further, he decided to do business with him just because he was sure that Amelio was not gay. Elsa was not looking very pleased with the conversation that they were having at the moment, and as Courier remembered the woman that was in the village, he just got the image of Nina. However, this time also, she was being protected by her overprotective father, Andrew. He finally got the picture that the girl in the village was never going to be an option for him, and at the moment he really wanted to live his life peacefully, so he decided to let it be and go with the flow. As the scene changed, they were already sitting in the drawing room, and Elsa decided to bring some tea for them, as any other maid would do. Being familiar with how they needed to react, the ladies asked for his type of tea. However, Courier was still flustered, stirring continuously when the lady was serving it. Amelio read it like Courier was uncomfortable, and agreed to it because he had never been able to live in a space where they had maids in their place. Amelio was aware that even at the trading company, Courier had never been the one who gave orders for the subordinates to do, and the reason Courier was aware of it was because he had been a corporate slave all along until his 27 years of life. As Elsa gave Courier the cup of tea, he gently thanked her, which Elsa didn't like, and told him that since they were the subordinates and servants, he needed not to be that formal in any case. Amelio was also agreeing with him, as it looked like he was the servant acting rather than her, and he also believed that it was just the starting days, and he would slowly adapt to the situation accordingly. Courier tried to play the role of the chief. However, when he gave a look to Elsa, her eyes were pretty terrifying, and he was not even able to move a bit, and understood that even though she was kind and beautiful, she was intimidating. He stepped out of his place as he was already very suffocated, and while doing some stretching, remembered that it was Amelio who had contacted those girls. He was aware that Elsa in the house had a calm attitude, a girl who heard through all the magic conversation without batting an eye. On the other hand, another maid was very scared because it was Amelio who was playing along. Elsa, on the other hand, gave a vibe of an ice maiden who would not be budged in any condition, and while he was still in his contemplation, someone called him from behind, and it was Reed from the Thunder Party, who was his first customer. Both of them decided to go to a tavern to have some drinks, while Reed was telling how he had been suffering because Courier was not there to help them teleport from one location to another. As Courier inquired about the other party members, he came to know that the women went to the public bath, while Rox went out for drinking with other guild members, as there was a day off. Courier remembered that he had a private bath at his place, so he could do it any time, and there was news already spread all around the corner that Courier was already working at the trading company. As he told the other part of the story, Reed was shocked to know that he had bought a prime house in the capital, which came with maids, and his current expressions were telling that he was also interested in knowing how the profits really operated, being one of the important members of the trading company. He didn't spill any tea, but just clarified his position that buying a house and keeping maids was never a plan because he had never been able to act in the shoes of an employer. Reed was taking that conversation like he was bragging around, but in this present situation, Courier was really troubled and terrified. So in order to help him with the situation, Reed decided to tell him his part of the story, where he was also young and had other things to worry about when he first joined the guild. As an adventurer, he met with several failures, and there was some time he could not achieve anything. He believed that if the management was strong enough, then even lower adventurers could manage to make a living. He asked him that even if it was his first time being an employer, he should stand on his grounds and take the right actions to maintain his stance for the employees' sake. Courier got a clearance in his head about what he really needed to do, and as he was walking down the street, he remembered that the girls working at his place were very calm, but still, they were kids who were facing the first test of work. Him being a corporate employee was already aware of how strong the top management should be, and that is why he decided to brace himself to hold it all together and maintain a good culture inside the house. Elsa was standing at the door like she was waiting for someone, and as Courier entered, screaming about his arrival, it somehow startled the girl back to her toes, and Courier felt somehow responsible for all of it. He gently apologized for barking it out of nowhere, but Elsa, remembering that she was the maid there, started apologizing for losing her composure, even though she was not at fault. Courier realized that whatever composure she held at her current age, she was a kid, and he should not let it off, and then commanded her to prepare the bath as he was going to take one. Elsa gently agreed with a bright smile on her face, like she was waiting for the first command from the master, and as Courier saw it, he realized that he was going to make them work comfortably to be over the master in any case. As he was still laughing and acting normal, his stomach growled, and it made him feel quite embarrassed, and gave a signal to the maid that the boy was hungry too, as he had only drinks back at the tavern. Actually, at present they didn't have a cook at the place, and as he decided to order from a restaurant for the day, Elsa went into thought and said that they should make it all by themselves, and even though it shall not be equivalent to a professional chef's food, Courier was happy that there was someone who could cook at the place, so he asked her to prepare as he came back from the bath. The food table was also served with different kinds of dishes along with tea. All the dishes were pretty ordinary but yet looked delicious to him, so Elsa gave a clarification that it was prepared by those girls who were nobles yet living in a remote region, so they were pretty common too. Actually, the daughters serving wouldn't inherit lands as per the rule in that country, so most of them married into other families, and the fourth or fifth daughter usually married into families of lower status, like knights or merchants, and that's why their status was not far from common people. With the act, it was pretty clear that these girls were training to be brides, and as he gave it a little more deep thought, he wondered if Amelio was planning it all along in order to make him fall in love with one of those girls and marry. The thought was very scary, so he decided to put it to rest and said the food was delicious. He enjoyed it and then slept soundly that night. The next day he woke up in his lavish house as the bed was very comfy. He realized that the morning was quite luxurious as everything around him was pretty expensive. He believed that life in the capital was really not bad, as the most important thing for him, which was the bath, was available there. Having a bath at home meant he could enjoy it every day, and it was so spacious that he could soak all day without worrying about what was going on in his life. Things were different the first day when he shifted there. When he was bathing, Elsa asked if she could wash his back, and it was quite embarrassing for him. However, as time passed, he was getting into the flow, and the moment he got up from his bed, Elsa was waiting, questioning what he was going to do for the day. Actually, the renovation in the village was about to be completed, so he had to go there and would not be at the capital for the next 3 days. Since he had informed Amelio about it, he just asked her to pass on the message in case something came up. His life with the maids was getting smoother with every passing day, and after getting the command, she gently bowed in front of him in agreement. As he was leaving, she even wished him a good trip, and it was like a wave after someone went away. As he reached the village in front of his house, he realized that everything was nicely done, including the front gate. The exterior was all the same, however, the paint was all new, so it was getting a good vibe, and a small garden was also built. The grades were pretty subtle, and they were boosting his excitement. However, everything came down when he tried to open the gate and came to know that, since the gate was changed, the locks were also removed, and he had not received the keys yet. His way of messing up things was getting intense, and since he was not aware of the carpenter, he decided to pay a visit to the village chief to get the keys. Nina noticed that Courier had come back, so she immediately called out for him and told him that she was the one who had been keeping the keys all along, and it brought excitement to the face of Courier. Instantly she went to bring the keys and then handed them over after a few minutes, telling him that those were the new keys. It looked like she was waiting for something else before heading back to her place. When Courier asked, she showed an interest in getting a view of his new house, and as she got permission, her face lit up with delight because she felt that she was the first guest in this new house. Courier found it pretty adorable, seeing her jumping in excitement, and even though he was not feeling too romantic, he wanted to start a family and have a kid like her in her growing up age. Right now, he didn't have a crush on anyone, so he decided to go into the house to inspect his new house. The moment they entered, they found that everything was ready, renovated, and the house was very neat and clean. The vibe had really changed since the last time, and as the little girl was proceeding further into the house, Courier asked her to stop and then gave her a pair of slippers. He told her that they didn't wear shoes in the house, and as she took the slippers, she asked if the culture was in the capital also. Courier told her that it was his personal preference and was a bit unusual because there was no hidden meaning to it. Actually, the houses in the capital were designed for shoes to be worn inside, and there were maids to clean, including the streets, which were also paved, so they didn't turn out to be dirty. However, when it came to the village, things were totally different, as there was dirt and grass all around, and if someone stepped into the house with those feet, it would really take a lot to clean it every time. This was the reason he, during renovation, kept in mind to prepare another designated place for shoes. As Nina wore the slippers, she realized that they were super comfy, and she was more excited now to get into the home and check what changes were really made. Considering the comfort, she was even seeking to take them back to her own home. They soon went to the second floor of the house and found that it was more spacious than before because he had knocked down the wall that was previously built, acting like a connection point to the kitchen, and had just made it open and airy. Courier believed that a cramped kitchen would just make someone lose interest in cooking, and as he was saying those words with quite a bit of confidence, the lady questioned if he was aware of how to do so. Since Courier had been living alone in his previous world for quite a while, he could manage it a bit, and it somehow excited the little girl to know that even guys could cook. Nina had never seen her father helping her mother in cooking in the kitchen, as he just drank and moved around, and at the moment they both could remember and picture how it looked. The thought even gave a sneeze to Andrew, who was standing at the main door, thinking it was cold. Nana told him that none of the men usually cooked at the place, and Courier had also realized that males often went outside to work and had never been involved in housework. He was really taken aback as an outsider from the total community, even after being someone who just got average food together. Courier clarified that the only reason he made it more spacious was so that they could share meals and cook together, and he had even allowed that family to come in and cook when he was not around. His only intention was to live more family-like moments so that they could have more connections, and he didn't want his house to go to waste while he was away. Nina was just very happy, and her delighted face was telling that she was enjoying every passing day from the moment Courier came back to their village. She was very excited to cook together and do all other things, including playing around and visiting the flowers, because she was really glad that he came back to the village, as everything felt good now. She gently raised her hand to get a handshake in declaration that from there on, they would be neighbors, and as Courier did so, he felt very overwhelmed with excitement. Out of nowhere, Nina remembered something, and as the thought struck, she immediately ran to the window to look outside, remembering that she needed to go back home, as she was designated to help out in the garden to grow green onions. Even though she didn't want to go, as she had a lot to do back at the house, Courier gave her assurance that she could come any time because they were neighbors. In return, she decided to share some green onions with him once the harvest was complete. As she left, Courier remembered that when he came back to the place, he saw that people grew vegetables in the small garden, and since he also had a small house, he decided to start a little gardening thing all by himself too. He decided to gain more information about it from Stella the next time, but as he entered a room, he found it all empty, and his sound echoed, so he realized that before anything else, he needed to fill that empty space. To ventilate, he immediately opened one of the windows, and the smooth wind coming from the mountains directly to his face showed him the realization that he was having the best moment at the time, and from there on, his dual living life finally began. After a few hours, Andrew knocked on the door of Courier to tell him that he was there to help him with the moving, and even Courier thanked him for it. He told him that he was already done with everything, which kind of shocked Andrew, as it was very quick. He had done all that with the help of his magic, so it was never a trouble to handle heavy items, and as he confirmed that the boy really didn't need any help, Courier felt guilty for denying it because he came all the way from the main gate. Andrew still was not done, so he suggested throwing a housewarming party, which he had been thinking about long enough, and since they were done with the shifting, he decided to ask Stella to prepare for the dinner. Courier appreciated it too because he was also very tired of preparing his own meal after working all along and settling up with the house. Andrew immediately ran off to his own place to get Stella and Nina, and Courier realized that the guy had worked all day and still was full of energy, so he was going to learn a bit from him. Just in the next few minutes, the whole family came back to Courier's place, and Stella reconfirmed if he would be happy if they barged in on his house the very first day. Before immediately, her parents told them about the rule enacted in his house that no one could enter with shoes on. Nana confirmed the same with a bright smile on her face with Courier, and as they got it, she asked him to take off the shoes and get them the comfortable slippers, which they also found pretty comfortable and decided to get some for their place. Those guys were pretty amused when they entered the drawing area, which was all filled with different kinds of furniture and was giving the vibe of a true home. Nina was the one who was more excited to say so bluntly. Andrew praised the styling of Courier with just some simple words, and as Courier looked to Stella, he found that she was not uttering another word, like she was unwell. On the other hand, Stella was just at a loss for words after looking at the kitchen, and her eyes were glittering with the incredible view as she went on to check the kitchen with cubed magic tools from the capital. More excitement was around the water magic, which was also injected. None of the guys standing there had ever seen Stella this excited, and as Nina was asking her father to get it, he told her that it would cost them a fortune. Stella simply apologized after coming back to her senses, but Courier asked her to keep the motivation, and she could use anything she wanted at the place. As those guys were in a little conversation, Andrew asked his daughter to barge into the house to explore the other areas, while the mother was trying to discipline them, telling them that they needed to maintain their calm as if it was someone else's house. None of them heard even a bit, and as they ran off, Stella apologized for the noise, but Curado said it was nothing because he was more lost in what she was going to cook for that day. Stella, without wasting a second, told him that she had brought something back from her place to prepare the food and then opened one of the baskets, which was filled with all types of ingredients that they were going to use to prepare their meal for the night, which included cream and potato soup. She mostly suggested what they were going to have at the dinner. Curado was getting more and more excited, and as he remembered that back in Japan it was the summer season, he was really interested in enjoying the seasonal dishes. He then inquired about the menu they were going to have for dinner and came to know that it would include mushroom magello, stir-fried with meat and vegetables, along with salad. Both of them decided to cook before the father and daughter got hungry. First of all, both of them changed into their kitchen attire, and Stella was getting impressed with every passing second whenever he was showing the spices and fire magic-equipped stove. Curado was taking charge of cutting the vegetables, and Stella praised him on his cooking skills because it was quite amusing that he could cook for himself. Curado was feeling a little embarrassed for Stella, as it had been like that Andrew had not helped her enough. Curado believed that whenever she would ask him to, he would jump for help. He really liked this family, and while they were in the middle of this conversation, Andrew was listening to all of it while sneaking from one end of the kitchen area. His position was quite scary, and it kind of startled Curado towards it. It didn't take him more than 2 minutes to get inside the kitchen and throw Curado out of it, telling him that he was going to take command. Curado was totally blank, as he was not able to understand where all of it came from, and the reason turned out to be that he had spilled the beans about Curado and her mother getting all clumsy. Curado gave her a scary look, and then both of them decided to sneak and get a view of how the couple was really enjoying themselves back in the kitchen while preparing food. Those guys were enjoying it like it was a kind of movie, and Curado was giggling, seeing that the couple was looking cute together. Nina, at the moment, wanted the same relationship that her dad and mom had, and it gave an understanding to Curado that kids like her often got into what they saw and observed around themselves. Right then, Nina was also called for help from the kitchen, so she immediately ran off, asking Curado for his help. After a few hours of continuous work, they were finally done with the preparation of the dinner, and at the moment, they were having wine before the heavy dinner. For the night, they were going to start with Andrew's cooked food in the beginning. And as Curado and Nina took the first bite, their facial expressions completely changed as they felt that it was undercooked. Andrew was not at all liking it, so he screamed in anger, telling them not to say bad things about it, and Stella was enjoying it all along. Those guys enjoyed the meal, and everyone went to sleep. The next day, Curado woke up once again, but this time he was at his village place, and then remembered that he was not going to get a cup of tea directly after waking up, since he was in the village. He served his own tea by heating it on the stove, and then went to the balcony to enjoy the beautiful sight of the morning through nature. It was not very lavish like it had been in the capital with maids at the place. He was happy that he could live freely in his own style, happy that he could change the mood as per the requirement, being all grumpy and relaxed whenever he wanted to. After throwing the dishes into the dishwasher, he went outside to give a stretch to his body and was doing a bit of exercise. Nina, again in the morning, noticed him and then came running towards him, being curious about what he was doing just a second ago. The moment she came to know that he was doing stretching, she decided to do it along with him, so Curado asked her to mimic the movements, as it was a healthy thing. Curado was counting and then reverse counting while Nina was doing the same. As things were done, she found that the moves were pretty silly. Curado felt a little embarrassed but told her that this would just clear out the body, and it would be fun in time. Since they were done after a bit of practice, he asked her to rest. Stella also came around looking for her child at his place and then apologized for Nina creating the inconvenience in the early morning. She further told him that the girl was very happy since he came there because she was having a lot of fun. Being a good mom, she even asked the lady to play in moderation and then asked her to get back to farming as they needed to do work for the day. When she left, Curado waved her off and then found that he was all alone once again, and it showed him the realization that Nina was his only company in the village. Thinking that he could not survive the place just with that thought, he decided to enjoy life to the fullest, thinking that he was not alone. So he took a seat under the shade of a tree to enjoy nature. Just chilling at the bottom was giving him a different type of comfort, and he was imagining how he could just use the suggestion of Andrew to grill sausages at the place along with a fine drink. As he was looking into the sky, another idea came back to his head, so he immediately stood and then found a place where two of the trees were pretty close to each other. In the next few minutes, he tied a proper layover bed to both ends of the tree and found that it was pretty nice, and he was also happy to use the leftover ropes and fabrics from Amelio's store. While he was giving it a thought, he was feeling a bit uncomfortable, as it was handmade. However, the moment he lay back on that thing, he realized that he was feeling weightless, like he was in space without any gravity. He praised himself for being a genius to implement his first thought to such perfection, and while he was enjoying the luxury, he kept looking at the sky, seeing the birds roaming around. The bright little sunlight coming from the leaves gave him a different kind of comfort. In such a situation, he just lay back and was taking a power nap at that time when, out of nowhere, Nina once again came and startled the boy, calling him by his name, waking him up in the middle of his sleep. He inquired if everything was good, as she came out of nowhere, but she was more interested in knowing what he was doing at the moment. Stella followed the girl and again apologized to the man for creating the inconvenience, and Courier understood that this was a common act of kids, and more like Nina, who were pretty curious about knowing what was going on around them. It was just something they could not let go of. She was interested in giving it a try, so Courier decided to offer the opportunity and then gently helped her to lay over. When it was all settled, she was enjoying it, and it was too fun for him at the moment, and every swing was giving her another level of excitement, and it looked like all three were enjoying it. After a time, when she was fully satisfied, Stella asked her to get back to the farm, but she suggested the lady give it a try, as it was far better than anything. Courier was also allowed, as it was of no inconvenience, so Stella, following the instructions, gently lay over the hammock, and, as she was about to close her eyes, somehow got lost somewhere. For the next few minutes, the other two guys were generally waiting for her to wake up, but it looked like she went into a deep sleep. Out of nowhere, she came back, remembering that she just could not spend her time at the place, as she had to get back to work. When Nina felt that her mother needed a day off, she suggested she not do any work for the day, but it looked like Nina was more interested in playing rather than taking care of her mother. Stella immediately denied and told her that crops were just living beings who always needed their care, so they couldn't let it go. With a little scolding and teaching, Nina agreed to go along with her mother to help her in the garden work. As they left, Courier gently waved them off, and then remembered the words about crops having a life because he was not aware, since he had never been able to live a self-sufficient life like those guys. Giving it some contemplation, he remembered that his countryside life was also a part of the experience, and as he lay down on that bed, he saw an imagined dream where he had plotted his own vegetables in his small garden back at home. Just the image of it motivated him that he really wanted to do it, so he decided to give it a try. However, since it was pretty early, he decided to take a day off, taking Nina's words pretty seriously. Around the evening, when it was about time for the sun to set, Andrew came back from his work and then immediately went down to Courier's place, asking permission to ride the hammock. It looked like he kind of interfered in Courier's relaxation. With no other choice, he took him to the place, and the thing really kept in trend for a while. On another day, Courier paid a visit to Andrew's place to look at the small garden they had back at their home and told him about his thought of growing such vegetables at his place too. Andrew decided to help him, seeing his interest in crops. However, he first inquired if the boy had some kind of experience or not. He gently acted cute but was not able to deny it up front, and with an understanding that he knew nothing, Andrew decided to start with something simple. Thinking about something that was a beginner-level crop, knowing that the boy could easily go to the capital to get his daily needs fulfilled, he started thinking about what could be grown with minimal effort. The only thought that came to his mind was green onions, which he could grow, and as they were in the middle of the conversation, Stella came around and greeted them. She then told him to pay a visit to her garden, where she had been growing them at the back all by herself. The green onion little garden was looking pretty extraordinary, and Courier was amazed with the magnificent garden with such great maintenance. He was just concerned if he could maintain the same back in his own garden, so Stella gave him motivation that it was pretty easy to do, and he could easily do it. The motivation worked to give him a little more confidence. Andrew simply took one of the green onions grown in his garden and showed it to Courier, which was pretty big in size. He was just shocked after seeing it that big. However, for the couple, it was just a pretty standard size. Courier remembered that these guys were really not aware of what was the real worth of the thing they were holding. Back in Japan, the thing could easily cost a fortune for some common people to have. He even told them that other agents' onions were small and thinner, but for those guys, that was just like a weed that they washed off every time they grew such vegetables. Courier was looking like a weird one while speaking those words, and as Andrew simply cleaned it, he broke it into 2 halves and gave Courier one to give it a test. Taking on the command, he took the first bite and was completely lost in the sweetness of the material because he believed that the thing was just like a fruit and could be eaten with just grilling. A lot of thoughts were coming to his head, including using it as a garnish over other foods, making it a versatile product that could be used in the kitchen in various ways. Just a bite of that thing gave motivation to the boy that he was going to grow green onions, and the decision was quite fast. Stella even suggested he take a look at another crop called nagamo. Since the vegetable was not from the original world, he questioned, and Stella clarified that the thing tasted close to potatoes and was very delicious to eat in the first suggestion. He was then taken to the next field where it was grown with effort, and the sight was pretty amusing for him, as he had never been informed in his entire life. Andrew told him that those things were pretty hard to grow, as even a bit of slack would harm their survival, but since the crops were easier to grow than the green onions, it might be the best choice for him to go through. Just then, Stella brought one of the potatoes to Courier, telling him that it was longer and thinner than a regular one, and it had some resemblance to sweet potatoes. She just gently handed it over, telling him to cook whenever he wanted to have it, and as she took confirmation of what he was going to grow, finally, after going through everything, he clarified that he was going to grow both, including the green onions and the gagamo. Being more generous, Stella decided to share some of the seeds with him, but Courier was never expecting such a move from the family. However, they were not at all worried about it, as they had plenty of it back at their place. Those guys were ready to help him in any condition whenever he was in trouble, and the eyes of Courier were just explaining how amused he was after coming to this place. Getting the seeds, Courier went back to his place and then decided to measure the garden area he was going to prepare, considering the size of 4 meters long and 3 meters wide to be sufficient as per the recommendation. He was not sure if he could manage such a gigantic plot, so he decided to expand whenever he got used to it. However, the first step from there was going to be clearing the weeds from the ground, as there were plenty of them. After thinking a bit about how to do it, he used his spatial magic to cut those weeds from the ground, and it worked perfectly well without any trouble. Using the power continuously, he sliced every part of it, and then used a broom to clear the mess of other leftovers after tilling the soil. As he was using a tool to remove the roots left, he remembered that he could use another magic of distortion to dig the soil, so without any thought, he decided to give that thing a try too. The boy was fully indulged in it when Andrew came to hand him over some fertilizers, which would be useful for the growth, but the moment he saw that the weeds were completely done in just a flash, he was not able to understand how it happened. Courier clarified that he used a bit of magic to make it easier, and as the man was more curious about knowing how he had done so, Courier decided to show him practically by using a slash right in front of his eyes, shocking him even more in amusement that something like that was possible. Just a single illustration was not enough to satisfy the eyes of that man, so he asked for multiple demos, and Courier did show, and every time he was doing it, Andrew was just praising him more and more. After being satisfied, he again praised his magic as a fascinating thing, which was more exciting than before, but Courier's eyes were all settled on getting the fertilizers that he brought to hand over for the help. As Courier tried to reach, Andrew simply lifted up the fertilizer bag like he was taking it away, and then, in some sinister voice, decided to make a trade, asking him to help with the weeds if he wanted to have the fertilizer. Courier imagined that the guy was going to hand it over for free and then questioned the change in heart, while the man reacted that it was just a trade-off. Courier also changed his aura and decided to trade fairly, equally telling him that only the area he was going to use the fertilizer for would be cleaned. Andrew was never ready to be so detailed while playing that move. Coming back to his previous self, Courier just apologized for his play, clarified that he was always going to help him, so it was never going to be an issue. Andrew thanked him, thinking that the boy was going to help him a lot, but Courier was aware that he was already doing well enough in his present condition. Andrew further apologized for playing a joke with a merchant of trades. However, Courier was aware that real merchants were much scarier, and the time he was thinking, Amelio was flashing in his background like he was just nothing. Both of them decided to move to this place, and Courier remembered that from the moment he came back to that place and met this family, he had been on the receiving end. Since the beginning, he was just thinking about what he could do to repay the kindness that he had received all along back in the village. After a while, when he came back to his place, he started ploughing, and after a while, he was tired and took a little break for the day. The previous day, he had spent his hours removing the weeds from Andrew's place, and in return, was able to get dinners from Stella's hand, so it was an unequal exchange. After a while, when he looked back at his plot, he found that everything was pretty well done and was giving the vibe of a proper farm, and he himself was proud, knowing that he was doing well. Considering his exercise was also a part of the routine other than teleportation, He felt accomplished. As he was thinking further, he heard someone praising his good work with the farm, and when he turned around, he found Greg and Taylor standing aside. He immediately recognized both of them, pointing his fingers as if they had known each other for a long time. As he called them by their last names, both of them believed that they should give a proper introduction, which they didn't the last time when he came as an adventurer. So the lady introduced herself as Angelia, and the man was Glyph. Kurito, being formal enough, bowed in front of them to give his introduction, but the lady just asked him not to be so formal, as they were the ones who should apologize for not paying him a visit after he moved into the place. The lady was interested in other talks, while the man just asked him bluntly what he was going to grow on that farm. After getting an answer of some potatoes and onions, the man went to give it a look at how he had been maintaining the land. Giving him a suggestion, he told him that the mounds for the potatoes should be a bit higher because the roots spread wide a lot, so they could come out from the mounds. Kurito was happy that he was getting advice from everyone, and while he was just thinking, the man handed him a bag filled with cutlery and told him that it was just a housewarming present, which could be useful. Before Kurito could get over that gift, the lady also brought something forward, telling him that she had brought homemade butter and cheese, which gave off a tremendously amusing smell. He was not aware if it was good to take all these things from them without paying anything in return. Glyph had made all that cutlery with his own hands, as their family had been in the artisan business for a long time, and Kurito was just amazed that those were made by some of the greatest craftsmen, judging by their appearance. The old man had a smile on his face when he was praised by the boy, but he tried to walk it off. However, the other two understood that the guy was just blushing after listening to compliments from him. Even though the old man was just looking grumpy at first glance, he was a really kind person on the inside. Angelia, on the other hand, raised cows and sheep, and right now, she had a lot of sheep that produced milk. That sounded very nice to him, and she told him the benefits that could arise after keeping a herd, in the form of convenient wool, milk production, and further, the same could be used as meat. Kurito was not ready for that comment, but she didn't care and even suggested that he should be the one raising some livestock too. Since their work at the place was finally done, they decided to walk off, wishing him good luck for the rest of his life, and he gently thanked them for the presents he received out of nowhere. As he went inside, and the night was around the corner, he served the food he got from the old lady, including the bread with the butter, using the old man's cutlery, and started enjoying it, finding it rich in taste and pretty delicious. The dish was lightweight and easy to use. While he was enjoying the meal, he remembered that everyone in the village had their own role to play, and it was not only with the old couple but also with the family that lived in front, including Andrew, who used his strength to hunt and keep the village safe, while Stella and Nana grew all sorts of crops. He believed that everyone there contributed with whatever skills they had, and that was why the village was thriving on mutual support and didn't require any magic. He was having a realization that he should also play some role in helping them out, and then wondered what could be the possible way by which he could bring something to the table and not just be on the receiving end. When Kurito walked out the next day from his house, he found someone standing who greeted him good morning, and it was the mayor, Leroy, paying him a visit, apologizing for being there so early and reconfirming if he was finding the place convenient enough. Kurito started praising what all he was liking, including the air, food, and the people. However, he was distracted by the word inconvenient, and his face was showing that he was feeling a little down. So Leroy simply asked him what was the reason behind it. Being pretty honest, he flustered a bit and told him that the previous day the old couple came to check up on him, and they even gave him some housewarming gifts. His heart was just filled with gratitude, and he was very happy until he gave it a thought about what he could do to help in that village, since he had been receiving all along, and he wanted to repay the gratitude. He believed that from the moment he came here, he hadn't done anything because of a lack of skills and commitment like everyone else, and it was a kind of shame when he enjoyed his dinner with the family, but never put something on the table. Larry understood his condition and was happy that the young man was giving such deep thought to that. However, he told him not to rush so much, like he was hurrying with life. Those words raised the ears of Kurito, and the man continued to tell him that the village was pretty rural, and there were not many shops or choices at the place. So it was very natural that kids who grew up there left their hometown to get to the capital, and it was the same feeling with Greg and Taylor, who left their parents after being educated well enough. Kurito remembered that he was the one who fulfilled their request of bringing down the letters from the capital, and at the moment, the old man was considering him to be young, which was pretty ridiculous as he was already 27 years old. Leroy was just happy that someone like him, who was already well settled in the capital, moved into the village, and the thought amused him. Kurito was just touched after hearing those words, and believed that the old couple coming to pay a visit to him was a clear clarification. Leroy was happy that finally someone young came back to the village after spending time in the capital, so he again told him not to worry about anything, as at the moment he should just focus on his life and enjoy it through. With those words, Courier was able to get a glimpse of his father saying to him that he should live his life the way he wanted to, and this acted as an eye-opener for him. So he once again thanked himself for being glad and coming back to the village. At that moment, he decided to relax a bit and remembered the words of the mayor, who told him that he could contribute when the time came because good ideas and results didn't come in a rush, and it was always an experience that was better than haste. As he was wandering around the village, he found a place that was properly protected, and beautiful tomatoes were grown there, so he decided to pay a visit to it without asking anyone. As he went into the farm, he found that the tomato field had a lot of them, and he had not seen such farms in the village, but this was quite close. He just loved tomatoes and was wondering if he could get them directly, but the moment he paid a little bit more attention, he found that the tomatoes were in an odd shape, resembling an onion, and the color was also pretty stunning. While he was still in the middle of his inspection, someone came up behind him, and the moment he turned, a shovel was pointed towards his neck as a guy wearing a straw cap was warning him to leave his tomatoes, calling him a thief and further telling him that he would regret legal actions if he continued. He was continuously calling him a tomato thief while Courier was trying to clarify his situation, as he continued to tell him that it was just a misunderstanding and he was just inquiring about the odd-shaped tomatoes, which he had never seen in his entire life. The boy was not able to recognize his face, and then Courier introduced himself as Courier, who recently started living there. With just those words, the boy was able to understand that he was the same weirdo who came back to live in the village after settling in the capital. As he started caring for his tomatoes, he continued telling him that he called him a weirdo because his actions were a clear indication that he really didn't care about his luxurious life in the capital. The boy was calling him young like himself, and his words were pretty harsh, so Courier told him that although the capital was rich, it didn't mean it was better, as at the moment he was liking the village more, including the people and buildings, which had a sufficient amount of nature. The boy was thinking that he was easily able to say those words because he had already enjoyed his life in the capital, but the expression of Courier was not giving him any such kind of vibe, so it was like a compliment for him. The boy simply apologized for being suspicious, as there had been idiots who sneaked into his farm. But for Courier, there had not been any bad person in the village. However, the boy had to be always on guard because he was not from the village. The straw hat guy was not at all liking his formal tone and reconfirmed what his age was, and after getting to know that he was 27, he was again shocked because his face was not showing evidence that it was true. The boy just remembered that the guy was just 1 year younger than Andrew, and as it was enough introduction from his side, Courier asked for the boy to do it for himself. The boy introduced himself as Olga, who ran the tomato farm, aged 22, and was one of the young freaks in that village. Courier was just amused that there was someone of his age living in that village, as he wanted to make friends. Both of them had mutual feelings, and they just shook their hands together. At that moment, Courier felt that something was wrong, and it really was a smashed tomato, which was spilled over his hand, and Olga decided to laugh in isolation, like he had tricked him or something. Courier was getting a feeling that he could really get along with him, and after going to a well, he washed his hands to remove the tomato stain and then asked what kind of tomatoes he was growing at the moment. Olga was just aware that they were the normal kind of thing and not something suspicious. Courier was not ready to accept that, as the regular ones were round. However, the straw hat guy did not care, as he was just aware of his own tomatoes. All he had done was go to the nearest village to sell them, and not any further than that. Courier remembered that his thoughts were true because logistics were quite harsh. Without cars and planes, the freshness deteriorated during transport, and since there were also monsters, they could not just toss them up and go to the capital to sell their produce at a higher rate. Out of nowhere, an interest in having one of the tomatoes pointed towards the farm. However, the boy stopped him and then threw a tomato piece towards himself, telling him that they were not ripe enough, so he could have one from the cart. Courier simply thanked him, and as he got his hands on those tomatoes, he felt that they were heavy and well-sized, yet not too green. He was complimenting the tomatoes even more, and the producer was not getting a good vibe that he was playing with it, so he asked him to eat it instantly. Following the command, Courier took the first bite and was lost in the delight of the taste, as it was much sweeter and more acidic than other tomatoes. However, Olga was not able to understand what the guy was really trying to say. Courier praised it for being delicious, and his expression was telling that he had never eaten something like this in his previous times, and that made Olga get a bright smile on his face, like someone was trying to praise his produce. Even though he had confidence in the flavor, he was just happy that someone praised him, which was giving him a good feeling, and Courier understood his condition, as it was a general one when someone praised their hard work. In actuality, there was no compliment without any work, as the shape and taste of the tomatoes were leagues apart, including the moisture and richness, which were totally on a different level. Each and every part of the credit went to Olga, who was the mastermind behind all these beauties because he had crafted them using his heart and soul. But the wrong part was that even now, Olga was not really aware of what was the worth he was currently building with those tomatoes. Courier was not able to grasp this information that they had something much more valuable yet accessible to limited people, and this was not only the case with the tomatoes, but also included Andrew's green onions at the moment. He believed that confining all that to a particular place was just like a waste. He was making some really ugly faces at the moment, so Olga was not able to stop himself before asking what was the reason behind it. So Courier, looking down with his eyes, just told him that the fruit was very delicious and asked if he didn't want the taste to reach millions. Olga was not able to understand what was going through the head of Courier while he was just thinking about Amelio, finding some very premium price for the product that he was going to present to him, yet it looked a little scary. Olga kind of understood what he was trying to say, but it was of no worth because if he wanted to sell it to a populous area, then he would have to worry about the waste that could generate rather than making a profit, because transporting such material to a long distance would be a hurdle. He believed that the current village where he was growing these materials was just the only pipeline to sell, but before he could complete the sentence, Courier screamed out to tell him that he could be the one who could help him spread his tomatoes all over the country. Olga was totally unaware of the capabilities of our protagonist, so he was counting him as a mental patient saying anything out of his own will. As Courier tried to explain what he could do, he stopped in the middle and then realized that he had finally found a way through which he could contribute to the village. Once again, as he really believed, he decided not to tell but to show him practically what he wanted to say and then question what he would say in case he landed in the capital in just an instant without spending much time in a carriage to go there. Before Olga could give a single answer, Courier caught him by his hand, and the next moment, when they opened their eyes, they were already in the royal capital, standing in the middle of the streets. Back at the capital, Kashin was wandering in the streets while singing, enjoying her day off, which she received after a long period of time when Courier laid off his job of working as a transporter, due to which she had to even work late nights to complete the job. She didn't want to spend her precious time thinking about it, and was about to go and enjoy an ice cream when Courier, along with Olga, just appeared right beside her out of a sudden, startling her in the middle of the street. Due to shock, she even fell on the floor, and Courier, unaware, was just asking what she was doing there. While they were in the middle of a little chit-chat, Olga was totally moved because he was not able to understand what just happened and why, out of nowhere, he reached the capital and was able to see the royal castle. The man now began to believe that whatever the boy was saying earlier about traveling between the city and the village was really true, and while he was thinking, Cushion just asked if he was a friend of Courier. Olga, on the other hand, was seeing a beastman for the first time, and as she gave her introduction of being the one working at the guild, she didn't leave the chance to ask him to join it while holding his hands. This was far beyond anything Olga had ever reached in closeness to a girl, and as he was about to lose his composure, Courier realized and immediately took him to the other side, telling her that he was just someone whom he tried to explain how his own magic worked. As they were going, Cushion once again asked him to visit the guild any time he wanted to, and Courier agreed as he said. Using his teleportation once again, Courier moved from the middle of the city and reached back to the village to get the good breeze, and while Olga was still standing stiff, telling him that this was how it worked, the boy was just about to fall out of shock. He wanted to tell him that through his magic, they could easily eliminate the distance, but it all happened in quick succession, so the boy needed time to understand. He realized that he could sell the items in the capital, however he questioned if he had the market. Courier, once again, saw the time where he could barge in his information and told him that he was working with one of the reputed trading companies that could negotiate, and his magic space and transportation could help in storing the tomatoes without harming their current state. Olga was still not able to believe that the tomatoes could make it to the big city and would be able to sell, and as Courier realized that the boy was really hesitant, he told the same to the guy. Taking it to heart, Olga somehow did not like such a comment coming out of him at his age. He finally asked what was the thing he was getting after helping them sell their produce in the market, and the simple answer that came from the mouth of Courier was that he just wanted to make the village a little more prosperous, and this was the only benefit he was seeking at the moment. He clarified that he really loved the village and wanted to contribute in any way he could. He himself, without any name, had already reached so many places, and even if he believed that the thing would not work, he still wanted to give it a try. So he wanted to make the village's vegetables not just reach the capital, but go nationwide, and at the moment he was giving the boy the trust he was looking for since the beginning. Those words were very intimidating for Olga, so without thinking any further, he just scratched his head and told him not to talk, as he was never made for it. Thinking a bit more, once again, Olga asked if he was sure that the material would sell in the market, and Courier, with a stiff face, without any hesitation, agreed, saying that he was very confident in it. As there was a little moment of silence because Olga was waiting for him to budge, however, since Courier's face was still stiff, he agreed that his confidence was worth a shot. While picking up the straw hat from the floor, which fell after he returned from the capital, he told him that he really wanted to see if the tomatoes could stand in the capital city. As the excitement was at its peak, Olga showed real resolve and asked if he wanted pure money. The way he asked it was very straightforward and clear. He told him that rural people required more funds to make their produce than the urban ones. Courier was also aware that money was a major factor that caused concerns when it came to trade, and as everything was settled, both of them shook hands in agreement that they were going to make a trade of those tomatoes to reach nationwide. Courier once again turned back to Nina's place while she was collecting water from the well. As Courier appeared through his teleportation, she was delighted to see his presence there. He was there to meet her parents, so as they were working in the field, he immediately went there and apologized for interrupting in the middle of the work, but there was something that he needed. He went on and asked for some time so that they could get a place to sit around and discuss. As he told them the complete story, they were not able to believe that Courier was thinking of selling their crops in the capital. Andrew had the same question, if their product would sell, as they were just regular crops. However, Courier did not like the comment, so he screamed to tell them that they were really not regular in any case, and after gaining back his composure, he told them that these green onions, which were thick, sweet, and pretty big, were nothing like those in the royal capital in the first place. Andrew was not aware of such information at first, and still had the same thought that in case he left all the material back at the village, it would surely be a waste. All the produce, including the potatoes, was still an approved one, and since it was easy to cultivate, the shipments would be steady, and they could earn far better than they were earning at the moment. Andrew believed that the things were very normal for them. However, others, including Courier, saw it through different eyes. As he was worrying about the village chief, whose permission could be a major concern, Courier told him that he had already taken care of it in the first place. He told them that the plan included selling Olga's tomatoes and other unique vegetables, milk, cheese, and meat available in the village. As Andrew came to know that he was able to meet that guy, he was happy, including the little girl, who was delighted to know, as she loved Olga's tomatoes more than anything. Andrew questioned him if the boy was going to use the trading company connection to sell the produce, and so Courier agreed and clarified that since he was affiliated with a decent trading company, he was hoping to distribute it to the markets and restaurants from there. Andrew had also heard of the Amelio trading company, which was taking over the complete situation right now because every now and then, whenever merchants passed by, they always gossiped about its intense growing speed, and the clarification that came to his mind was Courier's magic, which was involved in it. Courier was able to understand that since the name of the company had reached even to the lower parts of the village, it surely was growing at an intense pace since it had a clear background. This was reassuring, so the next question was whether the people in the village would help in selling their produce to the market or not. Andrew looked at his better half for clarification, and as she gave him a bright smile, it was a go-ahead. Courier was also looking for other crops that could be beneficial and could easily be sold in the royal capital, so he asked Andrew, who told him that they themselves did not grow other materials. However, they were aware of some people in the village who grew other delicious things, and they should check it from them. From there, Andrew took the boy to other places, and he tasted materials, including sugarcane and watermelon, and collected samples of everything at one place, which was back at his home. At night, he was delighted that this much would work. At the moment, he was getting a glimpse of what all material was available back at the place, and choosing out of which was really a tedious task. However, at the moment, he was not ready to take everything at once because Amelio's impression was going to be the most important thing. He was still thinking about whether that guy would listen to his part of the story, because in case they didn't see any profit or value, they wouldn't hesitate to reject the opinion, even if they were friends or something. He was aware that tomorrow's discussion was going to be a crucial one. As the scene turned back to the capital, the next day, Elsa was busy taking care of Courier's residence when he came out of nowhere, using his teleportation magic, telling about his arrival, but this time she really didn't budge a bit. Courier was not at all expecting such a reaction, but she gently bowed in front of him and wished him back. He was happy that she had adapted, and she was just admiring herself that she wanted to be the head maid, so it was just a learning process. As earlier, she checked if there was any particular message from the man, and since there was nothing, he decided to go directly to the trading company to show his produce. However, the maid informed him that Amelio was already present at the place. When he came back, Courier really was not expecting that the guy would be at his residence, and as usual, the guy made an excuse that he was aware that the boy would come, so he just dropped by. Turning back to the topic, Amelio questioned if he was enjoying life back at the village, and Courier's answer was in full confidence that his time back there was far better than what he had at the capital. Amelio was even presenting a request to go to the mountain area to rest, and the way he was enacting it looked like Courier was an old-age human who was in his early retirement, enjoying his time. Stopping in the middle of seeing something, he told him that he really wanted to discuss selling something, which Amelio was never expecting in the first place because the guy didn't even put a single effort into selling items earlier. Courier took out all the material he brought back from the village and placed it on the floor, and when he told him that these were the crops harvested from the village, Amelio did not like it at all and was about to walk from the place. So he was forced to hold him back by his coat, asking him to wait. The boy just wanted to have a display of the items and hear him out, as all the products were pretty fine and in good shape. Before discussing anything, Amelio questioned if the people from the village asked him to do so, because if that was the case, he could not sell it, as it was not even adding much to the company's profit. Courier clarified that those folks were not the kind who would ever put a request like that, and he brought those materials because he never wanted to do anything dishonest to the villagers or to Amelio. Those words were pretty reassuring, so Amelio immediately apologized and went back to verify the basics of the material through his own eyes and mouth before accepting that he was going to work on the proposal for the crops, which gained the interest of Courier. Courier had a bright smile, hearing those words that he was going to get into a negotiation, and as Amelio gave it a deep look, he realized that that kind of quality was really not available at the place. Courier was happy that those words came out of his mouth. He told him that back at the village, these materials were pretty normal, and it was the reason Amelio was able to understand why they always escaped his network, because the perception of normal could be different in different situations, and special could be anything of which an image was made. Courier was very excited, hearing those words coming out of Amelio's mouth, as he believed that if that was the thought, then they could surely make a sale. He was currently talking like a true merchant who believed they were going to acquire the quality goods and sell them in the market at a high price through negotiation. Amelio was just happy that Courier had also started looking at it the same way because this was something that would add value to the premium product. Amelio still had a little confusion regarding the taste, while Courier was very much sure about it because he was aware that all that mattered when it came to vegetables and edible products was how they tasted and what the flavor of them was. He had selected those materials from many other options while doing the same, and if he trusted the taste as the main attraction, then nothing was above the village food. He decided to sample it on the basis of raw first and then slice the onions into perfect sizes while handing them over to Amelio, telling him that they were safely stored for protection from any damage. Amelio was pretty impressed, and the onion caught his attention through its size. As he took a bite through a toothpick for the first few seconds, he didn't even move a bit. After getting what it really meant, he was just amused with excitement at the taste because the green onion just melted in his mouth. Courier was already aware that it was amazing, and he was pretty much expecting the same expression. He moved on to tell how he could enjoy the same thing while cooking it to tenderness and get even more flavors from it, which would be superior while sipping some drinks. Amelio was impressed with the kind of marketing wizard Courier was turning out to be and, without waiting for another signal, immediately moved to the next product, which was the odd-shaped tomato, pretty big in size. He then gave a bite to the tomato and started chewing it, and his facial expression changed with every passing second due to the delight of the taste. He praised it for being very sweet and delicious, and Courier was happy that he could feel it. Even Amelio was aware that the product was totally different from what they got there, which was too acidic and watery, while this had exquisite sweetness and great texture. Those reviews sounded like they came from someone who was very trained to give them, and while they were still in the middle of testing, Amelio immediately called Elsa, and then handed her the tomato, asking her to prepare a soup out of temptation. Out of the gate, the three other maids were listening to the conversation, sneaking around, wondering what was the thing that was even raising the ears of Amelio. Without any further ado, they decided to get a taste of all the other materials lying on the table, and as soon as they were done, Courier questioned the merchant if they could sell. Amelio went into thought while wiping his mouth and then apologized for his previous rudeness, where he thought it was just favoritism. He went on to tell him that the crops of the village were top-notch, and if they followed all the procedures, they could easily be sold. He even praised him for bringing some good stuff, and told him that the only promise he wanted from him at the moment was that the products of the village would surely and exclusively be marketed by the Amelio Trading Company. At the moment, they needed to decide who the potential buyers could be, and so they decided to find out first. The scene then turned to the village, where Andrew was on gate duty, yawning as there were no abnormalities for the day. His little nap was interrupted by Kurito's sudden presence, and as he was startled, he immediately raised his spear against him, wondering if there was some scary thing in front. Kurito tried to defend himself, telling him that he preferred to go by the gate, knowing that Andrew was on duty. At the moment when his spear was close to his neck, Kurito got a flashback from previous times when he used to help adventurers in their work. Andrew inquired what the boy was busy with and why he wasn't paying any visits to the village for the last few days, and then came to know that he was indulging in selling the crops he got from the royal capital. As soon as those words came out from Kurito, Andrew was not able to contain his excitement and ended up asking him multiple questions. However, Kurito asked him to be a little calm, and since everyone was curious, he decided to bring up all the individuals from the village who would be pretty excited to learn what really went on back at the royal capital. Just in a few minutes, a group of more than expected people started to circle around the center of the village, while everyone was in conversation about what happened. Kurito himself was not able to believe that there were so many who were concerned about the crops they grew after a lot of hard work. The crowd was making Kurito a little nervous because he remembered that his presentation skills were not very good from his corporate days. While he was finding a way out to tackle it, Olga came from behind, as excited as ever, and then started shaking Kurito, questioning him about his tomatoes and what the news was around them. Somehow trying to hold himself together, he said he was going to give a report during that time. Olga was trying to make him understand that he had lost his sleep because of it. Someone called the boy from behind, and it was introduced to be the little sister of Olga, about whom Kurito was not aware even a bit. She was also one who used to help with the tomatoes. In a bit of conversation with the lady, Olga believed that there was going to be something between them, and so he snapped her to one corner, which somehow shocked the lady, as she was not expecting her own brother to ditch her at the time of need. Before she could even get over what she just heard from her own brother, they both started a little quarrel in the background when Nina came up with a smile on her face to tell them that the old man who was standing earlier was already on his knees from being impatient, so he needed to start pretty quickly. As everyone gathered and Kurito understood his condition, he immediately called to get to the topic. While everyone was just waiting with their ears and eyes open, the presence was quite intense, and our boy was getting nervous because even a newcomer was interested in the hard work they had done throughout the time. But in the end, he held the courage to tell them that they could not sell this material as shops. It was a hard-hitting experience for everyone present there. No one was expecting that line, and there was silence all around the crowd. Breaking it at once, Kurito clarified to them that even though they couldn't sell it at shops, it didn't mean they couldn't sell it. Olga was getting confused, as it was pretty contradictory, as both statements were fighting with each other. So he decided to tell them the story of how it really worked at that time, and how they were finalizing who would be the buyers of the product. Amelio reminded Kurito that the kind of products the company currently dealt in depended on seafood and rare monster meat. While Kurito was trying to understand the real meaning behind it, Amelio went on to tell him that the only reason they didn't deal in beef and vegetables was because anyone could find them at any corner of the shop. Currently, there was no port in the royal capital, so seafood could easily be fetched and kept fresh, whereas, on the other hand, vegetables and meat were just abundant at the place. The material Kurito brought was too weak for a fledgling trade association to sell, and since the market was already established, it was not that profitable for the company to enter. Vegetables and meat had got the tagline that the material needed to be cheap and delicious, which was the reason he agitated with vegetables at once. He ensured the boy was operating in a niche market, and since this was the thing, selling them was never going to be an easy task. However, Amelio's expression changed when he told him that they were not going to sell it in the market, but would supply it to restaurants. He clarified that actually, some restaurants were very high-end, which nobles preferred a lot, including the royalty, and since there was already an event where the trade association signed contracts with restaurants, and the trading company had one in the form of delicacies and seafood, they could easily pitch the vegetables while renewing the contract. Amelio believed that the vegetables Kurito had brought were going to get a decent reputation, considering he would use his magic for storage, and there would be no harm to the product. However, he believed that only that thing was not going to be enough, and at the moment, the trade association head trusted Kurito, but even if the perspective was broader than the general market, As ordinary ingredients were still unknown, they still needed a key to win against the familiar ones. He ensured they wanted some kind of flashy pitch to make the trade of the association, so they needed to conduct a testing session for sure. He remembered that, yes, Villa vegetables were available in the royal capital, and at the moment he needed to come up with something to have the favor. While he was still thinking about the flagship pitch by which he could make it better, Elsa felt that the boy was having a severe headache while getting a thought. She asked him to get a tea, and as she was preparing one, Curedo got an idea in his head and then immediately said some words to the lady, thinking that they might have a shot with that for sure. When the scene changed, it was already another day at Curedo's house, where a lot of people were invited, and as they were welcomed, they were introduced to be the esteemed representatives of restaurants who were waiting patiently. All of them were called for the last line for the vegetable session of Curedo. When the scene was being witnessed by the other individuals standing there, they were not able to understand why the Amelio company was entering the vegetable market when it was all about fish and seafood. Curedo in the background was helping those guys by bringing other vegetable buckets when Amelio stopped and praised him for his eye-catching promotion, which was a great success, and in any case, he was not expecting it to be coming out from him. Curedo was aware that it was not his achievement but that of the maids who pushed themselves in front with an ask, because back at that time, Curedo proposed for Elsa and the others to act as the poster girls. At first, Amelio and the lady gave him a stare like he said something very wrong, and there was an awkward silence for a bit, making Curedo nervous. In the end, when they didn't say something in the next 5 seconds, he realized his mistake and started apologizing, asking them to forget whatever he said at the moment. He was thinking that whatever he said really stood for harassment for unmarried girls, but as he shook his head, he found that Amelio was giggling, and he soon started laughing a lot because it was also something very unexpected to come from him, who was shy of even seeing how they looked. In his eyes, the thing was really not a bad proposal because all chefs were men, and if they got served by a beautiful woman, then they would have to take a bite, and they couldn't refuse. Curedo, with the last bit of fear, came to think that whatever he said was pretty disrespectful. However, Amelio was aware that nobles and royalty were not going to be there, so it would be of no harm. Amelio saw the testing session as a pure war thing, where they needed to step up from other restaurants who would be trying to drive them down, trying to tee up, but still, the thing was just not enough to bring all the restaurant seekers back on the table. Curedo tried to add something mysterious and told them that they could serve easily in his hometown's traditional attire. However, Amelio was impressed, as he was not expecting such a statement coming out from someone who was of Eastern blood. Curedo was sure that the output might work, but remembering his past, he was a little sad that he could not teleport there in any case. As he was trying to hold himself together at the moment, Amelio noticed his stiffness. Considering what he had been doing for his company, he decided to give it a shot, and the boy was just happy that the man didn't ask any further questions about it, as it would be just like him getting into the past. Before getting to the conclusion, both of the guys decided to get an acceptance from Elsa and the others, as it was of major concern, but Elsa, without any firm, well, and stiff voice, agreed that she would do it. She believed that whatever they were doing was just for the sake of their masters, and doing it for others would be just a normal household course. She clarified her position that she was told to assist the company from the start, and other than that, she lowered her eyes and told him that it was Curedo who was absolutely necessary at the moment, and she could do anything for him, and he could easily rely upon them without any question. The sight of the exchange of words was witnessed by Amelio, who decided to change the topic and seek confirmation from the others who were just standing behind the door listening. Their names were called, they just snuck open, and their eyes were telling in greater capital words that they were ready and were more excited about the hometown traditional clothes of Curedo. Curedo was getting the picture in his head of how it really looked, but before giving them the final understanding, he had something else other than that to give for what they were going to make at the testing material. Turning back to the testing place, the merchants were giving raw vegetable tastes and were delighted with the green onions and tomatoes, which were juicy, while one of the men was just so lost that he was asking for seconds of everything. Both of the merchant partners believed that whatever they had done was the correct move because the taste was not going to just vanish once they left. Amelio just asked Curedo to unleash his secret material while he was just being nervous. Someone called him from behind, and when he turned, he found Elsa dressed in a beautiful attire, holding something in her hand, telling him that she had prepared the test dish, which they were going to distribute at the end as their masterstroke. The aroma was pretty delicious, and it was smelled by everyone in the testing area. While she told them that the material was made up of vegetables, they gave it a look, and it looked like every vegetable was a part of that dish. Upon inquiry from them, she told them that the dish was from the Eastern country, which was a stew featuring everything, including the pork. Additionally, every dish was prepared from vegetables supplied by the Amelio company. However, the chef had never heard of anything like that. He took one of the bowls and then started testing it, and his facial expression changed drastically, as it was much more delicious than anything. The chef was delighted to taste the warm dish because the texture was very delicate and the sweetness of the vegetables was shining throughout everything. He was sure that this would work, and since the vegetables were very delicious, he was ready to discuss a long-term contract regarding the dish. Kurito in the background was just very amused with that statement, and as soon as he said that, he immediately came in front to consider the contract and decided to take over the discussion. When the news spread around the crowd, they were not able to understand what they really heard, as at the moment, the person in the center was Mr. Chamonter. He was the head of one of the 5-star hotels, and he never gave someone a long-term contract because of being a top chef. The 3 girls from the maid group suddenly interrupted their discussion, coming from behind, telling those guys that the dish was well prepared, and they could also give it a taste. The complete sight was being witnessed by Kurito, and he was looking at the expression of every chef who was getting it a try. Elsa believed that they had done a wonderful job, which was amusing as all the restaurants were currently ready to sign the contract with the Amelio company, and so their achievement was far above their expectation. Elsa was sure that whatever she suggested had a great outcome, while he remembered that this was just a home dish, not something very extraordinary to be made by a renowned chef. He told what the contents were and how he changed it through the vegetables he brought from the village to make it just a village-style nikujaga from a traditional one. The only difference in the traditional ones was that there had never been a tomato, but Kurito preferred it, so he clearly decided to include it to make the taste better. Elsa's words of bringing the taste memories back sent Kurito to a flashback where he was enjoying the nikujaga when his mother prepared it when she was still alive. He just gently thanked the lady for helping him recreate the flavors he had tasted a long time ago, but Elsa, on the other hand, decided to give all the achievements to Kurito, telling him that her happiness lay in the fact that she was able to help. At the moment, she had a bright smile, like it was nothing made up. Kurito, when he looked at the other end, found that all he had done at the moment was because of the help of everyone, and there was a pinch of salt from the original world that he produced to this outcome, which really meant that his coming to this world had a meaning. Kurito believed that he didn't only have unpleasant memories from his previous times, as there were some kind ones, and some he really had managed to go through and pay for his favors. Turning back to the present, when he completed the story, he told them that this was how it operated, but Olga was not able to understand the real meaning. Being the center of attraction, he told everyone that the crops had already been featured in the high-end restaurants in the capital, and they had decided to go for a subscription. At first, none of the villagers were even able to comprehend a single word, but the moment it shook them with the realization, all of them screamed in total shock and then even shook Kurito to know if whatever he said was really true or not. Once again, Kurito, with a bright smile, told them that the material would surely sell. Olga was just not able to say anything but was just standing stiff. In the next few seconds, his real emotions burst, and he screamed in happiness like he had finally achieved what he really dreamed of, and the expression was similar from the other individuals standing behind, listening to the conversation. They were just happy that someone had recognized the true worth of their veggies, and the high prices were just lifting them to the sky, while Kurito was enjoying seeing their happiness at its peak. Olga was not able to understand one thing and told them that if the material was being sold at such a high price at the restaurant, then it really stood for the traveling merchants who had deliberately looted them while not paying them the correct price for their products. Andrew, from behind, told Olga not to think that way and to look at the optimistic side that they had finally been noticed. Stella believed that their product was really very good, but the travelers also had to travel a lot of distance, which would simply lower the current value of the product. All understood this side of the picture. On the other hand, Olga understood that it was all thanks to Kurito that he was able to understand what was the real value of their crops. Left with no choice, he gently bowed in front of him, and it was quite embarrassing for Kurito, so he asked him to raise his head. He tried to clarify that there was no good intention behind it, but he was just sure that the product would sell, so he went for it. While he was trying to shift all the compliments from his end, Nina came in front to tell the boy that it was not at all true. To tell him the real worth of what he had done for the village, she asked him to look at the other side and see how happy the villagers were at the moment. Everyone was laughing and giggling, knowing that their crops were going to sell at a high price, and they were surely going to make some profit. The giggles of the old ladies and the guys at the moment were far more charming than the younger and older ones. Kurito understood what he had done, and he also brought a smile to his own face. To add to this, the mayor of the village came in front to express his gratitude for what the boy had done and thanked him for his great work, believing that it was because of him that the village was vibrant again. The villagers were also impressed that someone as young as him had achieved that feat. Courier was just blushing through all that gratitude, but in reality he was all worth it. He believed that he might not live there for the end of his life, so he just wanted to contribute. Those words were shocking to the Andrew family, who were never aware that he was going to leave in the first place. They asked him to take it as much more from him, as he had already done a lot, so all he needed to take care of at the moment was that he was part of the village and was going to enjoy every second he spent there. Stella also came up in front to tell him that he had already done a lot when it came to Nina, as she was enjoying her life in the village after a long time. The mayor tried to take the moment to tell him that everything happened with time, and he just didn't need to rush and enjoy his life freely and happily. The boy was having a bit of a tear in his eyes because in his past life, there were things where he could not express and was not able to sleep even at night. After his father passed away, all he was able to experience was loneliness. He tried to wipe out the tears. He was happy that he had some great memories he could recall through. Those people were standing in front and were happy to make connections with them. Courier was happy that he could really repay the favor, and as Olga felt that the boy was just getting too emotional, he asked him to lift his spirit up and not to cry. But the boy just wanted to convey that the village was one of the best places he had ever lived in. Andrew decided to celebrate the night for the wonderful day, and so everyone decided to bring something to make it a rare vintage. Soon, at Courier's place, glasses of beer were raised, with the mayor calling upon everyone to celebrate the great success. Everyone was happy, and the room was just filled with cheers and big links when no one was leaving even a bit of excitement behind to celebrate their win at the moment. Olga was drinking while the other villagers were in conversation behind, and the other ladies were indulging in preparing good food for everyone with happiness. It was a cheerful environment, and after a few more hours of celebration, when it finally ended, Courier was happy with the final swipe on the table that the women helped with, and his place was again really cleaned up. Courier gave a thought. He remembered that even the old man was not able to stop himself when his wife called, but the only guy who was not listening at all was Andrew, who just slept at the place, so Courier had to use his teleportation to send him back to his place. This was one of those rare times that he was able to enjoy such a gathering at his own home. After looking at it, he decided to get some fresh air. The man just stepped out and was happy to see the sky, which had glittering stars, and he was happy with his decision to live in two different places at the same time. He believed that working with Amelio was not a bad thing because it was a kind of satisfaction, and at the moment, he was feeling more fulfilled than anything. This time, he wondered if it was tough to maintain a personal and work-life balance, and when he thought about it now, he realized that he was just too busy worrying about the future while forgetting about his present. This was the only reason that he didn't want to create any differences in his work and happiness, and that was why he was living his life in two different places in a totally different atmosphere. The bright smile on his face while sitting in one corner of his home, looking at the pitch-dark sky with twinkling stars, showed that the boy was just having the best period of his life, and he believed that he would live this life as long as he could. On another day, it was around the stream where through the clean waters, even the fish were visible, and Courier was just excited to see the number of them there. Andrew was accompanying him this time, while the boy was just impressed with the stream and its cool and clear water. Actually, they had used the teleportation magic of Courier to come to the place, and since the atmosphere would get hotter from there, they decided to catch the fish and do their camping at the secret spot. Even though it was a time for them to enjoy themselves, the family man was not able to wash off the thought of getting scolded by his woman when she came to know about it, and both of the guys had plenty of work for the rest of their day. This was why they decided to enjoy their breakfast in the morning in a different manner, and as these guys were all equipped with the stuff required for their fun, Courier just unleashed all the magical items and tools by which they could prepare their food. Andrew had sliced the vegetables in the morning and had brought sausages along with eggs so that they could enjoy their time. For the bread part, he had sneaked some of the old lady's bread and butter, which was shared with him the previous day. For the plan, they decided to bake the bread separately, so the oil didn't stick. Hence, they decided to light two fires at two different pans and enjoy it all together, where in one of them, the eggs were steamed while the bread was toasted in the other. The cooking was going nicely, and as they were thinking of some drinks, first, they decided to get the fish from the trap they had set the previous day. After a while, they were all prepared with every kind of their requirement, and as the dish was served on the table along with the wine in another, both of them started enjoying it around the stream area, looking like a proper picnic. Every bite of that breakfast was giving them another layer of excitement. while Andrew was trying to tell him that deep inside the mountains, the humidity just goes away. As Courier was enjoying the sight and the fish wobbling here and there, he soon got a lot of motivation to work, so Andrew tried to bring him up on the table, saying that he needed to do it, and if there was something wrong, then he could really help. Courier then clarified that everything was working well, but the real reason behind his laziness was that he didn't want to go for it, as it was more comfortable there. Actually, Andrew, being from the village, was just much busier than before. However, that thing was not really bad for him, as he was happy to take the burden if he wanted to give his family a great life of their own. This was the only reason why Andrew had decided to balance his business with some excitement and relaxing moments, and it was a great statement for a 1 year younger guy. They then decided to head back to their walk. Courier again used his teleportation magic and landed in front of Andrew's home directly, while he thanked him for the ride, and Courier returned it back while thanking him for the breakfast. There was no laziness going from there on, so Andrew decided to go for a walk immediately, while the boy was just heading to the capital, as he also wanted to earn his livelihood, and so both of them wished each other good luck for the day. Courier again used his teleportation to vanish from the location. After coming back from his previous life, he was already submerged in the dual life. He was living at the capital and in the countryside, and it was all thanks to his spatial magic that he had connected two places that were never meant to be. His profits were quite immense for the village and the trading company, so it was just a win-win situation on both sides, and things were going pretty smoothly. Courier teleported to the Amelio Trading Company, directly towards the office of the chairman, but the moment he greeted him, the man was not looking in a great mood. There was an awkward silence for quite a sufficient period of time, and even though the man was trying to call him multiple times, he was not paying any attention. The moment he did, he immediately changed his facial expression to a bright one and greeted him back. Courier's expression did not change, and as Amelio inquired about his condition, Courier came to know that the man was really working very hard. Since the chairman was happy that the employee was keeping an eye on him, he decided to ask him for a favor, but Courier would only agree in case the content was not really dangerous. Amelio was not liking the caution, but Courier had his own reasons not to agree to it because every time in the previous struggling period, that guy had asked him to do some really dangerous missions, and it was all because Courier just agreed to whatever orders his masters used to give. Amelio still was trying to make his own stance better at the moment, telling him that it was thanks to him that the boy was earning great profit. But keeping the joke aside, he told him that the request was not outrageous, which meant that the man was aware of how outrageous his previous ones were. On inquiring about what the man really wanted, he just showed a request to visit the village where Courier used to live. Seeking clarification for the reason behind all that, Amelio clarified that the demand for the village's goods was already off the charts and the stocks were out, so it would be an important business partner for the trading company to move forward, which was why he wanted to meet and greet the farmers to avoid any misunderstanding and discuss what the future aspects could be. Courier remembered that, at the moment in that world, there was no way to communicate with each other, as there was nothing like a network or internet, so the only design was upon face-to-face regular meetings. Since human connection was key in that world, his teleportation magic could help in removing the major wall of distance. He believed that even the villagers had the right to know who really was dealing in the products, so Courier immediately apologized for not bringing up the topic himself, because it was his duty to do so. However, Amelio was not expecting such a statement, and with a bright smile on his face, he just called the boy reliable. Bringing out his merchant instinct, the man just clarified that all he was doing was because of his own benefit, as he wanted to make more profit out of it. Courier understood and then immediately agreed to take him to the village, and as the merchant was proceeding further, another idea snuck up in his mind, and he decided to carry a cart of trading company products back there. But Courier immediately denied, telling him that they were not going to make it a business trip. He was able to understand that a meet and greet was quite necessary, and Amelio had a point, but he really thought a lot about everything concerned. If introducing the guy to everyone was a great, even a good thing, this was one of the feelings Courier was not able to wash off from his head. Considering everything, he told the man to just keep the business occasion for the next time because Courier was helping and taking the material whenever he wanted. He told the merchant that if they were meeting face-to-face, then they needed to build trust first, and considering that the villagers were pretty soft, they would buy anything at any point in time without any rush. Amelio realized the same thing and then immediately decided to pick up his coat and get ready to pay a small visit as planned. But before that, he had an intention to go shopping and then asked Courier to join him. When they moved into the capital, they were already in the market and were selecting various gifts, which Courier was continuously keeping in his spatial storage so that they didn't need to carry them. Before going out of nowhere, Amelio offered him a soft cone to eat because this was some kind of reward for accompanying him during the purchase. Both of them decided to sit around the fountain, and they had a plan of not wasting too much time back at the trip, but believed that it was going to be worth it. Even at this moment, Amelio was planning to use every bit of a second's worth of some money, and it was quite surprising for Courier, who was just not able to understand how a merchant's mind really worked. Currently, his way of thinking was making Courier feel that the boy was now in good condition, as he had never seen him taking a break from work and even thinking about it. Looking at the condition of what he saw back at the office, it was giving him a feeling that the boy was really tired, and while standing beside him, he was just hoping that the man would enjoy nature back at the village. After completing their meal, Courier immediately decided to teleport him along with his merchant partner to the village, and as they reached, they were around the main gate when someone called him from behind, recognizing Courier. Courier decided to introduce Amelio as the one who used to sell their crops in the capital, and when the man heard that, Amelio gave his formal introduction of being the chairman of the trading company. The village guy was just astonished that someone so prestigious had decided to pay them a visit, and the only clarification was that he used Courier's magic to come directly to the place without any problem. The guy also had some intention of moving out to the royal capital to explore, but as the conversation was getting ahead, he realized that the boy was well known in the village, and everyone was really nice. Amelio realized that even the guard didn't have any kind of bad expressions when he came to the village. Further, the people who were seeing him at the moment were not emitting any kind of rejection, so in his regards, the village was really unique. He remembered that in other villages, there had been instances where he was dealt with a rough welcome due to his practices, and even Courier had heard multiple times that a rural life didn't really exist in that world because he himself had noticed such incidents when he was traveling with Amelio back in the days. This might also be the only reason why Courier's heart was just embedded in that place, and he didn't want to go anywhere else. Keeping the first thing a priority, he just welcomed the guy to the wonderful village. Amelio, for a few seconds, was just lost in the nature and the surroundings, which were pretty enthusiastic and motivating, and every breeze was just a call from nature, giving him reassurance that he surely could relax there. He realized the richness of nature and the abundance of the ingredients, which told him that the village was really welcoming, and he praised it for being great and understood the reason why Courier wanted to live there. He was just pleased that finally his merchant eyes also approved it, and as the day kindly started, they decided to meet the farmers immediately. Courier first decided to take him to Andrew's place where the leeks were grown, and as he was passing by along with the villagers, Amelio was emitting his Hollywood aura while greeting them and calling the attention of all the girls, considering that it was the first time they were called with such a demeanor. Both of them and Courier asked him not to pull this move out at Andrew's place because some of the folks there were just very devoted parents and too inclined towards their daughters, so if anything like that happened, they would not be able to sell any green onions. As he walked by and told him that the appearance of Amelio resembled a city guy, Nana might not get too excited. Amelio's ears perked up. He realized that the way he called the name, there was something that the person might be important. Keeping his hopes high, he paid a visit to the home, and when he met Nina for the first time, he was totally flabbergasted, and it shook him with a realization. While Courier was not really interested in girls of his or a little older age, Courier just clarified that he had a kind of big misunderstanding, and then asked Nina to call her parents. Nina then ran directly to call them up, and Amelio was still giving Courier a weird look while raising questions about the kind he really loved. As Andrew and Stella came around, they were astonished to see that there was someone from the royal capital, and it was the merchant himself who paid a visit. Amelio formally greeted them with his introduction and told them the reason for extending their connections with them was the purpose of the visit. Andrew was already aware of the company, which was growing at a very fast rate, and when he said those words, the merchant gently bowed in front of him to show honor, while Andrew had his own honors, who was happy to sell his products to such an esteemed company, and he was amazed by the reach of that boy who had already achieved a lot at his young age. Both family members formally greeted him and welcomed him to their village and praised his personality. Amelio was moved by the attitude he was receiving from those guys. It was never expected and considerate enough that they had not introduced themselves. Both of them decided to give their part of the introduction and to be the ones who provided them with green onions. Amelio was already aware through Courier that there was a farm where they grew a lot of that kind of onions, and he was pretty interested in seeing the cultivation location. Andrew, without a second thought, was happy to tell them how he had achieved the feat, and then immediately suggested he pay a visit to the other farmers who also provided their produce to them. Amelio was looking for such opportunities since the beginning, and as he got confirmation, Courier realized that, being a merchant, The guy was very sharp and had already adapted to the environment he was currently in. Even though Courier was not very good with words, that was what he was thinking of learning from his merchant friend. As they moved forward, they were able to see the different scenery of the complete village, which was quite astounding to normal eyes that had just seen the Capitol buildings. First of all, they met Olga, the tomato guy, and the other farmers who were indulged in their work. After reaching back to Courier's place, Amelio delightfully grabbed a wine glass and drank it all at once while praising it for being of great taste, and as other villagers were also there, they were impressed with his drinking capabilities, which were just off the charts. Amelio had traveled all around the world and made deals while drinking, so it was just a very easy thing for him, and all of it was being enjoyed the most by Andrew, who found a right partner for him at the moment. Courier realized that they were acting very familiar, but he was not able to understand the reason behind why they were drinking in daylight. Seeing the condition of Andrew, he was feeling a little bit worried because he might get into trouble after reaching back home when Stella saw him. As they were enjoying themselves, Olga decided to make his tomatoes a little bit more the topic of discussion and then decided to serve dishes made up of tomatoes, which was not expected by anyone. Olga decided to pull that move in front of every villager to tell them that they should know how to present their vegetables in case they wanted to sell them, and that was why other villagers also decided to bring their own produce to satisfy the merchant with their own products. As everyone was getting fired up, Courier decided not to lag behind and be a part of it. As Amelio saw the grilled tomatoes, he was just amused, considering that they were pretty tough to grill. However, Olga had a different perspective that it was pretty easy so that they could pair it with cheese to enhance the flavor. Both Courier and Amelio gave it the first bite and started praising it the very next second, calling it delicious and something rich in flavor and taste. Olga, on the other hand, was suggesting other methods through which they could cook it to perfect perfection, which would be even good for their health. Courier was moved to an extent where he was ready to eat it every day, and then immediately gave him an order for a complete box. Amelio was impressed with the knowledge the boy had about tomatoes, as it was the fruit of him to be a partner with, and taking the compliment, Olga just blushed, trying to act lazy like it was never meant for him. Just then, Courier had a thought and questioned by what name they were going to trade the other crops in the market, as it would be pretty concerning. Amelio's ears also raised, as none of them expected such a question coming out of his mouth, but Amelio just passed the table and stood up, trying to tell him that this was the real reason why he came there, which was to discuss it. He believed that selling the crops from the village without names would be such a shame for them, and that reason was pretty reasonable in the eyes of Courier to believe that the brand, as well as the bill, was totally essential, so they could surely name it considering where it came from. Olga was not able to think about it, and he was also finding a proper reason behind it. After deciding to give it a thought, Amelio was just ready to hear what was in his head, like he thought that the guy had already considered it. Olga was not able to understand, and he was just shocked because even though he could find a name, the other guy, who was playing at the moment after being all drunk, was not going to come up with anything. Olga was still trying to comprehend how someone could come up with a name directly without any thought, so Amelio decided to give him an example where things were just named from the country where they came from, which never changes. He started giving suggestions with the name of the village, and the second time named it after Olga, which was not liked by him at all, and he screamed in denial, telling them that it was pretty embarrassing to use his own name directly in association with the tomato. Others were finding it cute. When Amelio gave it a thought, he believed that the name of the village would get pretty muddled up because in the future, when the supply of the other crops would be done to the royal capital, the name would be used as a general term, so it was seen as a bit of a waste to use it as their personal tomato brand. Olga decided to find another name and asked them to give some time, but the more he was trying, the more the name of his own tomato was going through his head, so he just decided to give up for the moment. In the end, after continuous declaration and denial, a final name was given to the products, where everything was named after the village, while the tomatoes were given a unique one. When everything was completed, Courier was indulged in cleaning the room, and he was giggling a bit, remembering how Olga really reacted, knowing that the tomatoes were going to be under his name. Distracted from his own talks, he turned around to look at the balcony where Amelio was just relaxing a bit, and as he called him, he offered him some tea, and the guy gladly accepted it. He prepared the tea and went to the guy, thanking him for the hard work and asked Amelio if he was not tired for the day. The merchant, on the other hand, found it pretty fun, as he had enjoyed this village because there was nothing to show off there like the capital unnecessarily, and one could live there at their own pace. Courier was very happy and patted him on the back, telling him that he really understood what was the crux of it all, and then offered him to stay at the place as well. However, Amelio immediately denied, so Courier didn't even decide to tell him twice for the same suggestion. Remembering his past, once when he was going through the street, someone picked up something from the floor and threw it directly at him, where Rodney Sam protected him by dodging it. As they turned around, they saw an old man complaining about the trading company that had taken away their business of the contracted vegetables due to the village vegetables they were selling at the moment to the restaurants. His fellow employee just noticed that it was a kind of grudge and nothing else, and he was having an even darker memory at the moment, which he was somehow trying to wipe off. Even though he was in the middle of his thoughts, he wanted to tell Courier what it really cost to earn fame and rise in the capital, and as he was looking at Courier with pretty gloomy eyes, he just asked if something was wrong. He just smiled and thought that people really were very calm and cared about him at the village, and that's why he didn't want him to know what it really meant to earn fame. He just turned around and told him that he was very happy after coming back to the village, forming bonds with the farmers, but still, he wanted to grow his trading company to be one of the best, and it was a kind of motivation for him that worked. His glittery eyes were telling that he was not going to be confined by himself at the capital. Retirement was just far off the charts. Courier was happy that he still had all the hunger even after coming this long way, and remembering the real identity of the man, he was aware that this was the kind of person who worked really hard at the capital. He was still ready to pay a visit back to the village whenever he felt like his work at the capital was really intense. Courier was quite shocked with the declaration, however he was always ready to welcome him, so he asked him to come whenever he wanted to, as he would be the one helping him while bringing him through his teleportation. But it was going to come at a charge. Amelio was really in a mood, and he even was ready to play with him to not charge him for the travel. Courier was reacting like it was his own way of doing business, and he was not going to do anything for free. Stretching his body and relaxing a bit more, it was time for him to get back to the capital, and he decided not to stay the night because, even if he wanted to, he could really use Courier's magic to come back there. He had a lot of work waiting, so he wanted to go without any questions raised. Courier helped him go back to his place. As the next day turned in, he was seen working at his own farm, where there were very small weeds growing, and he surely could not use his magic to wipe them off at the moment, so he was doing it manually. While he had lost all of his faith in working, Nina came around and greeted him for the morning, asking if he was pulling weeds from the field. Courier agreed and contemplated how much of a problem it had been, considering the size of the weeds being very small. Somehow Nina read it perfectly, suggesting that she would also help with it while showing off her muscles. Courier was never ready for such a statement coming from a little girl, but she asked him not to underestimate her and then immediately went for the task, and she was doing much better than Courier at a greater speed. Her speed, as well as the technique, was something the guy really praised, but remembering that he could not leave everything to just a little girl, he decided to push himself a little bit more. After some hours of continuous work, they had finally achieved the target of removing all the weeds from the garden, and they had done it early. Courier was all sweaty and tired with the work, but Nina was still full of strength and excitement, which amazed the man of her real capabilities. He was not able to understand what he should do in return for the lady who had helped him without any complaints, so he simply thanked her and got in return a beautiful smile from the little girl, who was smiling like sunflowers were behind her. Courier was just amazed by the sweet kid and her great smile, and then decided to give her a glass of water to relax her a bit from whatever work she had done. Before leaving to go inside, the lady decided to grab her basket, which she brought, and she was considerate enough to help him when she herself had the work of gathering firewood. As a token of appreciation, the boy decided to help her in handling the firewood too, but Courier was in no need of firewood to make his food, though it would surely help him enjoy a campfire, so he was looking for his own interest there too. Going inside, Courier served her a chilled glass of water, by which Nina was very happy to get her strength back and was amazed that the boy was lucky to have ice at his place. She was looking at the glass continuously for a while to tell him that the thing felt really refreshing and amazing. Both of them cheered their glasses after enjoying it. The lady decided to get onto the work of gathering firewood, otherwise Tella would be concerned about her, and she had to do her best too. Even in that, the lady was not finding a way to be lazy, and as Courier called her, he handed her a cold towel near her cheeks, telling her that it was refreshing and they could keep it around to be a bit cooler. On top of it, he even suggested she pop some herbs into her mouth, and then both of them decided to go inside the forest through the teleportation magic of Courier to gather some firewood. As they reached, they found that there really was nothing lying on the floor because the place was very close to the village, and many people might have come to gather it all along. Considering the entrance to be the safest place, they decided to go a little bit inside through his teleportation magic, and as he used it, they were already around the stream where he had visited earlier. He then asked her to go for the grab, as there were a lot of logs scattered around, and they could collect them easily. He was happy that his previous visit to the stream came in handy, and at the moment when he was looking at the little girl, he was just amused by her courage and curiosity, because the teleportation didn't even come to her mind at once. Courier decided to help her through his spatial magic while storing all the logs she was collecting at the moment, and as everything was tossed inside it, Nina also threw her bucket there, but found it pretty strange how it just vanished without any trace. It gave her relief that her material was safeguarded and there was not going to be any issue, but before getting out, she was even interested in gathering some mushrooms so that they could eat them at home. Courier was just stunned, as he had never expected that the people from that world were aware of mushrooms, and him being a little greedy, asked her to share a part of it because he also wanted to have it after so long. Nina found other trees at another part of the forest and decided to run off to grab them while he just calmed her down, telling her not to get lost all by herself. After a while, they were done with all the collection, including the firewood and the mushrooms, along with other essential products. Since everything was packed, and both of them praised their hard work, they decided to get back home. Their plan was to relax a bit after their continuous struggle, and as they came back to Courier's place, their shoes were laid outside, and she was again served with a cold glass of something. She was amazed at being a tea also called iced tea, which was found in the royal capital and good for health. She found that the aroma of the tea was pretty exciting and totally different from what they casually drank, and as Nina gave it a sip, she found that it was not at all sweet, while Courier was expecting another astounding comment. Being surprised, she tried to make it up to his expectations, but Courier understood and then decided to give her something sweet which she could enjoy. He then opened the box to hand her some cookies, which were sweet and would tag along with the tea pretty well. Nina decided to grab one of them and then again gave a sip to the tea, and her real expression turned out where she was extraordinarily delighted to have it. She told him that the taste was much better that way, and it was a comment from a grown-up, so it really worked. Out of the blue, her excited face turned pale for a while, and she then told him that there had been really a lot of things at the royal capital that she had never seen. Through her dull face, Courier realized that he had kind of made her feel down. He was aware that she always had a deep feeling of visiting the royal capital, yet he was not cautious enough to ramble about a lot of capital things in front of her, knowing that she had never been there. He was aware that her reaction had been so real without any cover-up and had always been adorable. Giving it a thought for a little longer, Courier, out of nowhere, told her that he was going to pay a visit to the royal capital the next day and invited her to tag along this time. There was an awkward silence for a long while, and Courier just understood what he had really said out of nowhere, just emotions, but the answer was pretty expected from the lady, who was just delighted that finally she was going to have an option to pay it a visit. Actually, he realized that he had said those words because of a promise he made earlier, and Nina was already jumping in excitement, finding her dream to be true. However, when the realization hit him, he immediately told her to get the permission of her father and mother at once, which was going to be a non-negotiable condition. Still, her excitement did not waver a bit, and she immediately loaded up with the firewood and decided to run to get the permission immediately. Courier was able to understand that the lady was really courageous to have that strength, but at the moment, he was even able to contemplate what was going to be the reaction of Andrew when he came to know that her daughter was going to go with a stranger to the royal capital. Right now, the boy had just decided that defeat was going to come his way, and he was going to accept it gracefully. However, destiny had something else planned, as Stella and the kid came along to his home, telling him that Nina could go to the capital. It was so unexpected that Courier was not able to understand it, and was even asking for clarification, once because his problem was not with Stella but with Andrew. Stella gave him a background clarification that this would not be an issue in any case, as she herself wanted Nina to see different parts of the world. She had very much trust in the boy, and she wanted the kid to have childhood experiences that she could treasure all through her life, so she was never ready to miss such a wonderful opportunity. Still, she believed that trouble would be too much for him at the moment. However, Courier immediately denied, telling her that he was very humbled by that trust. She then asked him to take care of Nina, while telling Nina to be in proper guidance and do whatever she was told to. Courier realized that Stella had always made decisions in favor of Nina's heart and was excited to see that there was a kind mom like her. After getting the confirmation, he had decided to make it one of the most memorable trips while giving assurance to the mother that her daughter would be properly monitored. Stella was happy, but Courier, on the other hand, was having another kind of issue, as his stomach was hurting just thinking about how Andrew would react when he came to know that he had taken away his precious daughter. Stella gave him assurance that she would take care of everything. Even the big man was scared of the lady, Curato decided to just walk off right away. However, being a girl, Nina was just not ready because her hands were not in good shape, so she decided to run back to the place to regain her beauty. She asked for permission and apologized for such a quick reaction, but Curato was the one at fault because he didn't give the lady proper time to get ready. As Curato sniffed himself and realized that there was an odor, he also needed to change. After getting some good clothes and being in good attire, he realized that this much would do, and soon even the little girl came back, and Curato went to see her. She was properly dressed with calm, beautiful hair, having a small purse by her neck, and was truly looking like a small goddess. Curato was not able to take his eyes off her for a moment, which gave her a little insecurity about being strange. However, he just praised her, telling her that the lady really got genes from her mother, as there was very much resemblance when she was ready like that. Nina found it a pretty weird comment, embarrassing the boy even more, but he clarified his situation that he was just shocked about the beauty. But it really was not going to be weird at all to travel like that in the capital, and he then praised her for being one of the prettiest girls. The girl was not ready to take the hint, and there was a little denial there, but since she was looking way cuter, Curato was now able to understand what real transformation comes into a girl when she gets dressed up. The boy even told her that her popularity would reach a peak if she wore that kind of clothes on a daily basis. However, she really could not because it was pretty hard for her to move in the farms with those clothes on. She just decided to wear them on special occasions like harvest festivals and others, and as he gave it a thought, he realized that whatever she was saying was pretty true, and most of the concern was on the side of Andrew, who would really not like someone looking at his pretty daughter like that. Stella came to see them off, telling them that the kid was really very excited for the day. As Nina found that her caretaker was there, she immediately went to verify her present appearance and was given some instructions on how a lady should react in the capital. Curato understood that everything the small kid got was from her mother, and as Stella wanted them to leave as early as they could, she told them not to waste time chatting there. Nina understood the real condition they were in, so she decided to run off while pulling Curato, who was not even in his shoes. As they were about to leave, Stella gently bowed in front of him, asking him to take care of her daughter, and then got a proper confirmation. When both of them left, they waved off while Nina told her that she would bring some souvenirs, and out of nowhere, both of them went from the location immediately without any trace. Back at the royal capital, they reached near the tallest building in the middle of the market, where Curato told her that they had finally arrived. The moment that sight was seen by the little girl, whose eyes were glittering with the shine of the royal capital, she was just amused with the people and the surroundings, which were pretty enthusiastic, totally different from what she had always seen in the village, and she was not even able to take her eyes off for a continuous few minutes. She was at a loss for words. It was not registering even a single word, which gave Curato a little trouble, as he thought that something might have gone wrong. He decided to wipe off the nervousness from her face, and as he tried to approach, out of nowhere, the lady burst into excitement and started screaming after seeing the capital. Considering that there was nothing for him to worry about at the moment, he removed the thought from his head, and the little girl, all lost in her excitement, started pointing out different buildings and stylish shops that were located there, including the kind of people she was seeing. Lights of glitter were visible from her when she was expressing joy with everything that she was able to see, and as he decided to read her face a little more, he realized that the girl was just fearless and bursting with curiosity. He was sure that everything at the moment was a kind of fresh air to her, and she might be over the moon for everything she was seeing. The girl just started moving around, trying to find an answer to every question that was in her head, and the boy was able to feel a bit of jealousy. However, he still needed to take care of her. As the man gave a flashback, he remembered that the first time he was there, he had just the same white eyes, and everything felt so vibrant and new to him, and he also was buzzing with excitement. He wondered if she had the same feeling he had there, and it looked really like that. Nina was astounded by the tall buildings present there, and as she inquired about it, she got to know that it was the clock tower, which always showed them the correct time because there were a lot of workers working there with magic. Nina was delighted that people at the capital were aware of how to tell the time, but Curato read it like there had been a continuous rush there. He suggested they go up and see it from the top, even though it sounded nice to her. Her attention was, out of nowhere, grabbed by a little butterfly, which was moving around. Curato clarified that it really was not a natural one but was a spell cast by a magician who was showing his soul in the middle of the street, and every child was enjoying it. The man was a master at his skills, and out of nowhere, decided to show something else where he took his cap, and out of nowhere, wrought numerous flowers inside it, and then turned it completely into a pot of flour. This was not the end, as the very next second, he decided to make a rain through all those flower petals, and as Nina enjoyed it, She was just lost in the visuals her eyes were seeing at the moment, as it was a kind of beautiful memory for her. One of the flowers landed in her hand, and she found it pretty, and considering the capital had a feeling of happiness around, she was finding the capital amazing. Kirito, seeing it, was a little lost because if he had been aware that this much happiness would be brought if he brought her there, he might have done it earlier. At the moment, he decided to flex his own teleportation in front of her, and as Nina realized that she had not praised his magic enough for the day, she immediately went on to say all those words that would make him happy. As Kirito realized that since the start they had just been at the square of the capital and wanted her to travel even more, Nina was interested in having some good food for the day, and she found that food was the most relatable and understandable thing for her. Kirito started to contemplate the various places, as the capital was pretty vast, and food was the most familiar thing that everyone was aware of. He decided to take her to the market in the central district, and when they reached through teleportation once again, it was the general behavior of Nina that she was very excited because she was just not able to understand how many buildings were there, as they were all surrounded by them. Kirito realized that the day was off in the capital, and people might be more than usual there. As Kirito was aware that Nina might get too overwhelmed with the things and might lose her way, he needed to take care of her in all instances. Just then, she pointed out two beastmen who were talking to each other, and Kirito was just stunned at how she was aware of them without visiting the capital. She had read about them in books, but her delighted face showed that this was the first time she had seen them in real life. The little girl was utterly captivated by the fluffiness of those beastmen. In fact, even among the beast folk and lizardmen, they didn't all look the same. There were friendly humanoids like Kusha, and then those who resembled dogs or lizards more closely. Their appearance varied based on genetics and the strength of their parents' bloodline, which affected their physical abilities. Those with stronger beast traits often chose to become adventurers. The village was a small settlement of just a few months, so it was quite rare to see them, and Nina was eager to spot all kinds of beastmen as they walked through. Kirito was sure they could meet more of them, and while they were in the middle of their discussion, the beastman standing nearby noticed and called out, recognizing Kirito as the transporter. Kirito recognized them as Guro and Yuld, but Nina couldn't understand why they were calling him a transporter. The beastmen were confused about him carrying a kid along, and since they were there to see a friend, they decided to tease him, saying they could never have expected him to have such a cute kid all by himself. Kirito shot back a playful warning, telling them they needed to be cautious the next time they wished to use his teleportation magic, as it wasn't funny at all. Nina was happy to learn they were friends of Kirito, and the beastman praised him, saying he was the one who helped them in times of need during adventures. Once again, being a man, he couldn't take the compliment with a straight face. His eyes were blushing. Garo noticed that the kid had never seen a different race in her entire life, and was overly enthusiastic at the moment. He gently knelt down and offered her the chance to feel his fur, which brought another wave of excitement to the girl. She started touching it little by little, and the more her fingers brushed against it, the more delighted she became. She even hugged his arm, exclaiming that it was so fluffy and that she was enjoying it to the fullest. Both beastmen were completely charmed by the cuteness of the girl, and Garo was even wagging his tail as if commanded by his master. Kirito, on the other hand, was immensely proud of her charm, and since he also had intentions of touching the fur to experience how it felt, Garo didn't like that and shouted that the guy was not allowed at all. When asked for the reason, it turned out that Kirito had once humiliated him by treating him like a dog in the middle of the adventure guild while drunk. Kirito felt a bit down hearing those words, but on the other hand, the lizardman offered Nina the chance to touch his scales. She found them smooth and tough, quite different from the real character of the lizardman, who always cared for kids. It was all due to the warmth and kindness of Nina, which was her biggest charm. In the midst of all this, Garo told Kirito that the Thunder Party wasn't doing well at all, and had been missing him since he'd been absent from the capital. Both of them asked him to join and help them for some time as reassurance, noting that with him in the party, things had always been good and easy. They then brushed Nina's head and walked off, inviting her to come along next time, when they would introduce her to other races. Kirito and Nina waved goodbye, and she praised the kind of friends he had. She was also impressed by Kirito's multiple jobs, helping with vegetables and giving rides, which was why he was known to so many people in the capital. Her eyes were once again filled with gratitude when she realized that many people relied on him, and it was the total truth. Being relied upon was one of the best feelings about trading better, and he had helped a lot of people since arriving in this world because, in his past life, he had always neglected connections and ended up lonely. In contemplation, it was true that money wasn't everything, and since they had already wasted a lot of time, they decided to head to the market for their food. As they wandered through the streets, crossing some paths, they finally reached the middle of the market, where numerous shops were selling all kinds of materials, including vegetables. Each vendor was calling out to customers, presenting their merchandise. It was the first time Nina had seen so many shops in one place selling goods, and it was because the royal capital gathered ingredients from all over the world, which made it amazing. She had seen it for the first time and never expected that food would be sold like this. In a remote place like the village, they couldn't really transport things, so people usually visited the nearest village to barter for other materials. She was feeling a bit overwhelmed, but just then, something caught her attention, and she ran off, pointing toward a shop, saying she was going there. She identified one of the fish as Nevo and had a lot of information about it, patting it out of compassion. However, her excitement dimmed when she saw the price, which was quite expensive. Courier explained that mages freeze them with ice magic or use magical tools to keep them fresh, which was why prices always went up in the capital due to transportation and time factors. If they bought it economically at the shore, it would be cheaper. Nina understood that this was why Courier preserved all the materials with magic so they could sell at a high rate in the capital, and he was happy that she grasped the concept of buying low and selling high, the basis of business. Courier realized that the lady was very smart and a perfect fit for someone who could live in the royal capital easily in the future. Those words brought another level of motivation for the kid, and she asked for confirmation, continuing with her curiosity about making it to the royal capital. However, Courier hadn't expected such a statement to garner so much attention. Even though she wasn't sure about leaving the village in the future, she had thought that the possibility of growing crops lay in her own hands. Out of nowhere, Courier was struck by a realization of the mayor's words, where he had said that young ones often decided to leave the village, like Gray and Taylor, who had left, and since Nina wouldn't always be a kid, there might come a day when she chose to aim for the royal capital. But he couldn't be selfish at the moment, even though it felt a little lonely. He decided to help and encourage her when the time came, but wished that day was far off. While he was in the middle of his contemplation, she noticed that there were also vegetables being sold, and she decided to check them out. As she reached the shop and saw the onions, her face fell completely as she called them pretty small. The shopkeeper was hurt by those comments and called them rude, explaining that they had sourced them from a famous farm and even raised a sample to prove it. Courier apologized for what the kid had said and decided to teach her in his own way. The shopkeeper also realized he had said some words to the kid that he shouldn't have and apologized for it. Both of them then walked off from the place, and as the little kid inquired about saying something weird, Courier gently denied it. But the girl couldn't shake off the thought that he had to apologize on her behalf. As her motivation faltered a bit, Courier explained that what she said was true. However, it wasn't the shopkeeper's fault because the vegetables they grew in the village were, without a doubt, the best and most splendid ones. Not every place could grow such vegetables, and the shopkeeper was never aware of large leeks in the first place. He explained that they were just small in her eyes but normal for everyone else, and the difference was merely a matter of perspective, so they would learn and move on. Nina was even more moved by this and now felt that she had hurt the shopkeeper's feelings by saying those words. Courier offered her to see the other vegetables, as there were other things in the capital that were its real charm and through which they could also expand their common knowledge. Nina thanked him for helping her discover so many new things, saying the whole experience was incredibly knowledgeable for her. Now they decided to move to the next market, as they weren't going to waste the day they had to enjoy. They were walking down a staircase, both holding chocolate ice cream in their hands, and Nina was being cautious while descending because her stomach was growling due to hunger. They had walked around a lot and wanted something to eat, thinking of trying a trendy place where she couldn't normally go. She had gathered a lot of courage to ask for something from Courier after all this time, and even he was hungry enough. He realized that the lady was finally making the kind of request he had been expecting since the beginning. As per Courier's recollection, there really hadn't been a dining spot in the village, so it was normal for a girl like Nina to dream of having lunch at a cafe. He finally got the opportunity he had always waited for and decided to start right away with a smile. Once again, seeing her face, he started thinking of a trending place where he could take her, but after thinking multiple times, nothing came to him. He realized that he really didn't know about any spots like that. He was blank because he always drank alone and ate at home, so he didn't know any cute restaurants around. He desperately wished for a smartphone at that moment to search, but just thinking wasn't going to be enough. He didn't want to look pathetic by entering a random place. The restaurants used for guild meetings required dress codes and table manners, but what they ate was out of the question. He was thinking about a place that balanced royal vibes with style, but finding a good place for delicious things was quite tough. Just then, he realized that he owned a place at the location and asked her to go there, as it would feel nice, Somehow, the girl was much more interested in being there. He further explained that he had maids who cooked well of the house in the capital, so they could eat restaurant-quality meals, and the view from the window was very good too. Nina was eager to go there as she wanted to see the home, and the boy was satisfied that the lady was glad. It was settled, and he immediately held her hand and used teleportation magic to reach the location right away. The next place they landed was at the clock tower building, from where the entire capital was visible with an extravagant view. Nina enjoyed it, and Curato asked her to wait for a while so he could head back after telling the maids to prepare a meal. He was still not sure about leaving the girl there, but since there was really no one at the place, and considering she wouldn't move anywhere else other than seeing the sights, he decided to go immediately. In the next scene, they were both walking on the streets to Curito's place, and as they reached the main gate, Nina was completely surprised, believing it was a castle. Curito tried to deny it, saying the home was just very normal, and as they moved inside, Nina was getting excited by everything, including the fountain. When they entered, he found that Nina was enjoying her time with the maid, and Elsa handed Curito a list with details about shops Nina would probably love to visit. She was concerned about Curito's image, so she decided to list what Nina might like, including clothing stores, accessory shops, glass craft shops, and cafes. She even included a simple map, which Curito found pretty amazing, even though he wasn't good at these things. He appreciated it and said he was going to take Nina back to the village, so he wouldn't be available for the night. Since everything was planned, they decided to move out, but when Nina caught Elsa's attention, she, with a bright smile, told her that the cooking was very good and super delicious. She had enjoyed everything and was counting on her fingers the dishes she had never tasted before. Both were amused by the girl's kindness, and Elsa clarified that she had also wrapped some souvenirs for her to take back home. Curato had stored them in his spatial space using magic, and they were for her family, so she gently thanked her for the generosity. Curato believed that bringing her along was the best decision, and as it was time for them to leave, they headed back. The maids gently bowed in front of them, telling them to enjoy their day with Nina. As they left the place, they started wandering into the capital to different shops where many people were present for exploration and purchases. After so long, the bright excitement visible on Nina's face, they decided to check out other things, and when they left the place, the little girl teased him, saying the adult ended up buying more things in a childish manner. Even though it was just Nina, she had already started enjoying it and found it fun. She decided to keep the purchase in her own pocket rather than hand it over to the spatial magic user. Curato didn't say anything and let it go as it was, while they continued to explore more shops. They kept moving until something caught their eyes, and the kid's instincts suddenly sparked when she told him not to spend unnecessarily. It was pretty embarrassing to get scolded by a kid on the topic of finance. Moving on to the next stop that caught their attention was a ladies' apparel shop where Nina found hairpins, which she thought were adorable. She started looking at things, and as Curato realized those hairpins would look cute on her, he asked her to buy something in his favorite color. However, Nina was planning to buy one for her mom and was trying to find what suited her. Curato was building an image in his head of how she would look in each color, and since everything was pretty, it was hard to choose at the moment. In any case, she couldn't buy more than one if she wanted to buy something for her father, and Curato remembered that Andrew would cry tears of joy when he learned his daughter bought a souvenir for him. As a suggestion, he told her they should first buy something for her father, and then they could choose how many hairpins to buy. When questioned about what her father really wanted, both of them had the same answer at once: alcohol, picturing him completely drunk. In any case, they couldn't afford wine with what she had in her purse, so Curato suggested buying some wine glasses, which they could purchase directly, and it was a great idea. They moved to the glass section and found all different kinds, and when it was time to choose, Curato asked Nina to decide since it was her gift. Another reason was that his choice would be expensive, which would make her cry. As Nina raised one of the glasses, she found it amusing and a good choice. It looked good, and as they checked the price, they realized they could only buy one hairpin for her mom. Her father's gift was finally decided, and then Nina started checking all the hairpins on her own head to decide which would look good, finally settling on an orange one, which would definitely pop in the lush village. Before leaving, Curato asked what other color she was thinking of, and as she pointed, he told her to go for the billing while he waited there for a while. He looked at it for a few minutes, and then both walked off from the place. As they moved out, they found the place was far more crowded than usual, with many more people than on normal days. They couldn't understand if something was going on, and Curato had completely lost track of time because it was about to get dark. As he turned to tell the girl it was time to move back, he was shocked because Nina wasn't there. He immediately started searching for her and heard her voice from another end of the corner. As he grew more concerned, he ran to the place to get her and was glad she wasn't far away. He tried his best to get through the crowd to her hands, and when they clenched, he immediately pulled her close while she apologized for rushing out due to the crowd, which wasn't her choice. Kirito also apologized, and while they were discussing it, a firework caught their attention. When they turned around, they saw that the reason for the crowd was none other than the grand fireworks. Nina was a little moved by the fireworks, so she clenched Kirito's hand in the middle of the crowd, asking to stay a little longer. Both decided to give it a view, but the boy was more concerned about her father worrying. He again promised to take her back when the time came with his magic. It was a kind of reassurance, and with the promise illuminated by the fireworks in the background, the kid agreed with a bright smile on her face. Kirito immediately used his teleportation magic to land in front of her home directly from the capital, and when they reached back, Nina announced their presence with a loud shout while Kirito was just stretching his body. Both had enjoyed the fun a lot, and just then, when the gate opened, Andrew came out with tears in his eyes, as if seeing his daughter after a long time. He immediately hugged her, asking a lot about whether anything scary happened. Kirito realized it was nothing other than an overprotective father trying to shield his daughter. The moment she confirmed everything was fine, it acted as reassurance, and in the next moment she called the royal capital incredible. The lady went on to describe the huge, tall buildings filled with magic, the different races, the seafood in the market, and how the fireworks were fancy, feeling like a dream finally fulfilled. As her smile grew brighter, Andrew was deeply moved, but his expression changed dramatically when he turned to Kirito, who had taken his daughter without his consent. Stella came to the rescue and banged Andrew on the head, telling him not to give weird looks to Kirito because it was her decision to send Nina. In any case, Andrew was just happy to see her smile, which was a solution for everything, so he decided to thank the boy for taking care of her for so long. Kirito, with a smile, said he enjoyed it a lot too. He even talked about going with the family next time, but Andrew was blushing and couldn't handle it. All three started giggling, which was quite embarrassing for an adult. He tried to say it wasn't like that, but the agreement made him even more scared. Kirito understood that adults really found it tough to venture into unknown places, and then remembered something. He told Nina to give the gift she bought, which might ease Andrew's fears. Following the command, she immediately took out her bag and said she bought souvenirs for both of them. It was far beyond anything for the parents to get excited about, as they saw it as a gift from her, even though it was their own money. When she opened it, she handed over the beautiful flower hairpin from the royal capital, while Andrew enjoyed the wine glass and decided to drink wine from it every day. Nina immediately told him not to do it too often, and while trying to clarify, she couldn't reach a conclusion due to the multiple options available. Stella clarified that whatever she chose worked. Kirito understood that neither parent was different from any other, and seeing them, he got a flashback that this was the true meaning of everything. He regretted at that moment that he should have given some kind of gift to his own father. Even though he hadn't done it for his parents, he wanted to look for his family in these three. He brought some souvenirs for them too, and then took out freshly made meals by the maid from the spatial box for dinner, asking them to enjoy the night. As the chit-chat was done, it was time to move out, but before that, Kirito asked Nina to stop, and telling her to hold out her hands, handed her the hairpin she loved as her second choice back at the shop. He believed it would suit her too, and this was a souvenir from him. This time, Nina was more delighted than anything from the whole day. She immediately wore it on her head and asked how it looked. She was one of the most beautiful girls in the universe at that moment, and Kirito said those words with a bright smile. All of the conversation was overheard by Andrew, who was moved by how his daughter was enjoying every moment with that stranger, and he decided to thank the boy one day for sure. On the next day, while Kirito was lying on his bed, relaxing a bit, he remembered going out with Nina. He realized he really didn't know anything about the capital's entertainment. Even though he was in the lead, he had no ideas at all, and it was all thanks to Elsa. The way he was living in two places, only knowing how to work, was pretty sad. At that moment, he decided he would explore both places completely. The only problem was that he had no electronic means to gather information, and since he was a modern, spoiled person, his only way of contact was Elsa. She was a noble lady from the capital, and knew a lot about style and other things, so he decided to ask her for everything from then on. As he reached back to the capital, he went to his home directly, excited for the day, and decided to take her top recommendations. In the middle of his thoughts, he called for Elsa and opened the door without considering what might be on the other side. The moment he did, another maid was standing behind it, startled by his sudden appearance, and Kirito felt guilty for causing her distress. Even though she was in pain, she welcomed the master with kind words while tending to her nose, and Courier continuously apologized for not noticing her behind the door, deciding to get some ice and a towel for rescue. Elsa came from behind as he tried to explain, saying she was fully aware, and gave a stern look, telling the maid to relax a bit. The maid gently left. Courier still couldn't get over the guilt of causing harm and not being able to use healing magic, but that wasn't the reason he was there for the day. He decided to tell Elsa everything and the concern he was going through at the moment. Elsa understood that the master wanted to explore the capital's entertainment. He asked about how she spent her day and learned that she often went out alone to enjoy breakfast at a cafe or buy books, and after lunch, checked out clothes at stores. The day sounded like an adult way to enjoy things, and as he inquired further, he learned she often went to see paintings. The capital was home to many renowned artists and boasted an impressive number of art museums holding exhibitions each season. This was how Elsa spent her time, and she suggested asking the other maid if he wanted group activities. He decided to keep it for next time, as the real reason was that he had already caused her pain and didn't have the courage to ask. Currently, jumping into a large group activity felt like a big hurdle, so he decided to explore places he was interested in on his own for now. He thanked her for the tips and then decided to go on a stroll. As he walked off, he realized he had valuable information, so he would check her suggestions first. As he moved to the north side, he found people walking and moving together, making it a quieter place with less crowd and hurdles. Just then, a stylish mall caught his attention, and thinking about the good bookstores, he entered one. He found it extraordinary, with a little tree in the middle beautifully decorated from the interior. He was moved by the intricate design, as it felt like a theme park. There was only one difference. The stores were unlike those in Japan, where he had no clue about anything. As he noticed one of the picture books, he remembered that Nina had gained a lot of knowledge through those books when he wandered around the capital with her. Even at the moment he was reading it, she was in his thoughts, and he was buying it all, considering that he could pass it to the village kids whenever he got bored. As he moved out from the first shop after purchasing a lot, he felt that he had already gone overboard from the start and needed to be concerned about making any unnecessary spending, because even the last day, the little girl had scolded him. He decided to pause the shopping for the day, but he still couldn't go for lunch as it was a bit early, so he decided to do a little more exploring around. For the next part of his day, he decided to visit an exhibition at the painting area to enjoy what Elsa had suggested as her second recommendation. He reached one of the museums, which was an art one, since the capital was rich in art. There were guards present outside the museum, suggesting it might be a showcase of rare artworks. He honestly had no connection with art in his past life, but right now he had plenty of time and money, so he decided to give it a try. He bought a ticket, and when he entered, he was thoroughly checked from top to bottom and asked to sign in. The moment he entered, he found it pretty amazing and wondered what kind of art they were currently protecting that required so much security. The place was so silent that even the sound of breathing echoed. As he moved inside, he found that it was one of the oldest art museums in the capital, and its history could be something from which he could gain knowledge of the country. He moved forward through the art gallery, noticing all kinds of pieces displayed with a lot of brightness on them. As he reached one area, he found a crowd of people completely engrossed in a single painting, creating a huddle to get a view. His curiosity was at its peak, and the moment he found a spot to see what they were looking at, he himself couldn't take his eyes off the painting. It depicted the royal capital along with the castle in an extravagant way that was both amusing and pleasing to his eyes. He wondered what the name of the painting was, and it turned out to be Asterisk, the Castle of Jural Asterisk by Refuria. He was deeply moved by that piece of art, and the thought lingered as he walked out of the museum. It was the first time he had felt such lingering emotions from a painting that he could stare at forever. While he was thinking about the existence of such a painting, his stomach growled as it was already time for lunch. It was embarrassing to have it happen in the middle of the street among people, more than expected. He decided to go to the first place he thought of, but he was totally lost and had no intention of going there, considering it was filled with couples at the moment. His face was pale, and at the second place, where there were a lot of people in groups enjoying their time, it didn't feel like his kind of place either, so he decided to walk away from there too. The waitress made it even more awkward by calling him a single customer. Courier just gasped at his own situation and then decided to walk off from the place, taking a deep breath to calm himself down. He realized that the suggestions Elsa had given were tailored to her own preferences, like a girl's recommendation. The place had a stylish vibe, but it was too geared toward women, and since he was an alone guy, he couldn't feel comfortable at the counter. He decided to wander and find other places around, so he went on a stroll once again. Whatever places he visited at the moment were either closed or filled with couples and groups, which truly weren't his kind of place. The boy was about to lose all his motivation for the moment, and since the timing wasn't right and the places were crowded, he was losing all his strength. Considering the hunger he was experiencing, the trouble he was going through wasn't even telling him what place he had reached. In the end, he arrived at a spot where there was nothing, and while he was deciding to just walk off and ask Elsa to prepare food, a Black Cat coffee restaurant caught his attention through its aroma. Since it was a cafe, it was a situation for him after all the trouble he went through. He found the name pretty cute, and while he was thinking of an open space when he entered, he found it was completely empty with just a few customers. The place was spacious, and he was welcomed with a bright face, telling him to choose whichever seat he wanted. This was a joyful thing for him, and he decided to choose a corner spot where no one could be a nuisance to him. The experience was quite nostalgic, reminiscent of a classic cafe back at his place. Elsa's recommendations were already very nice, but this was his charm, which he found after a lot of struggle. As the waitress asked for his order, he decided to go for a sandwich lunch with iced fruit tea. The surroundings were soothing and relaxing for him, and while he was just taking a breather, he was served what he had ordered. He noted that the service was pretty quick too. The moment the sandwiches were placed, he couldn't understand what was in front of his eyes. They were pretty big and looked quite good, catching the boy's attention even more. The waitress clarified that it was her father saying that a small sandwich is not a sandwich. The man with a mustache was all lost in his own preparation of the coffee and looked like a gentleman. Since the ingredients of the sandwich changed daily, the menu was also named after the cafe. Quite extraordinary. She told him to enjoy the feast, and while he was about to take the first bite, he found there was a stuffing of egg and a nostalgic paste aroma from his past life. He recalled a memory where he used to eat sandwiches with a single hand, which were much smaller in size, but this time he needed to use both hands. Every bite was worth it, as he found it way more delicious than the previous ones. Even though things turned out quite different from his original plan, he found that this secret spot was the best choice, and he was seriously going to come back to the place more than once. After a while, when he was done with both sandwiches, his stomach was full, and so was his mouth, as he was delighted to enjoy his time. While he was getting sleepy, he decided to read a book while having iced tea. He opened one, and since the place was peaceful, removed from the city bustle, he decided to read there and explore more cafes before hitting restaurants for drinks. There were a lot of thoughts going through his head, and it was an extraordinary environment with the gramophone playing in the background, him reading books in a calm and soothing place, enjoying the surroundings. Out of nowhere, Amelio jumped into the middle of his peaceful time and greeted him, which shocked the boy. His face showed that he was very displeased with his appearance. Amelio was being treated as usual, very coldly, and as the man came out of nowhere when he ordered tea, it even shocked the waitress there. Her reaction made Courier wonder if Amelio had said something about him and Nina being in a relationship or something. However, Amelio clarified that he already had someone he cared about more than anything but had come there because he had some business. The question was how he knew Courier would be in that place. Amelio answered that since Courier wasn't going to any place Elsa suggested, there was no way he would walk into a friend's shop alone due to his character. This broke the boy internally, and the other words, like how he might run away to find a calm place and could easily be doubted to end up in a quiet cafe by himself, acted like arrows of shame. The feeling was infuriating, but Amelio was right on the spot. The way he responded, Amelio's act was like that of a detective, as if he were aware of everything from the beginning. As the iced tea was served, Courier lost all his motivation and entertainment for the day. Finally, coming back to the discussion, Amelio had brought a request from someone who needed to connect with Courier, and the involvement was from the Merchant Guild. It had always been the teleportation service that appeared as a skill and growth to his guild, almost like a monopoly. Courier was very sure that he never tried to hide his skills because it was something no one could imitate in the first place. Even at the time of his own kidnapping, he could escape easily. The request was from one of Amelio's old acquaintances, and it was rare for him to bring up such a topic, as Courier was unaware of his private life, which he never shared. Being gloomy enough, he inquired about the kind of person, and since the man was already waiting just outside, Courier was shocked that Amelio dared to bring them along without notice. Amelio went outside and called for the person, but it turned out to be a lady. Since she was beautiful and seemed a little fragile, Courier was flustered once again after seeing a beautiful woman. The moment she apologized for interrupting his rest and introduced herself as Referia, a painter by trade who created that beautiful picture of the royal capital, he was taken aback.